Sony Santa Monica eyeing Castlevania.
And Sony's finally clamping down on easy plats.
Hello and welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I am your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, in the absence of one sickly Mr. Chris Figs, we have Mr. Mr. Badbit himself, Joseph Moran. Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, you said it correctly. God bless. That. I love it.
From the PS Trophy Room, That's right. PlayStation podcast. You may have noticed we were there last week. So, Joe, how are you?
Dude, I'm happy to be here. I'm just so sad. I feel like the shtick should now be that we're never going to meet Chris. Like, I'm never going to see Chris. I'm just going to hear stories of Chris, you know? Yeah. Like, I don't know if he's real.
We have a long-running joke at this point where anyone who's been on the show and then for some reason is not. We did another podcast for a while, a movie podcast. Yeah. And whenever someone leaves or someone's not around, we always say like they're ghosts, they're spectral forms. So at this point, you're hearing stories of the ghosts of Chris Figs.
Of Chris, man. Rest in peace, Chris.
Well, like I said last week, I had the honor of sitting with Joe and Kyle on their podcast. And this week, I hope the honor is all Mr. Joe's. So before we get into a week full of Sony's investments into China, PlayStation cross Honda and the weirdest crossover, and saying goodbye to Volition, let's start this show off the only way that I know how, by checking in on what our esteemed guest, Mr. Joe, has been up to and what he's been playing. So, Joe, I pass the floor to you, sir.
I have been playing one game because we are a PlayStation podcast after all. I have beaten God of War Ragnarok. As of speaking, Brett, the reason why I was like 5 minutes, I'll be on in 5 minutes, was because I am literally 5 minutes away from the platinum. Like, ooh. I am that close. I just have to finish up the Crucibles challenges, which I have one left. And let me tell you something about the Crucible. Not a fan. Not a fan of how they laid it out. But nonetheless, it's a fantastic game all around, and I am enjoying myself. It just sucks that you can't talk too much about it because there are things I want to say, Brett. There are things that I need to get off my chest about this experience. And I can't go more than 5 hours deep or else I'm spoiling something. It's nuts.
For sure. Yeah, it's funny to kind of peel the curtain back. Me and Joe spent quite a bit of time before we actually started recording, kind of recamping our own thoughts on the game. And now that we've both finished it, because I too have been playing one game and one game only, really God of War Ragnarok. I technically played Hot Wheels Unleashed with my little nephew who's 5. He wanted to play a racing game. I was like, let's do it. Oh, absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
Not raising.
He's young enough. Now, hold on. My rule, 6 years old, gloves come off.
No.
It's my rule with my daughter. We were playing, I spent 35 minutes playing Connect 4 with her, and she genuinely won once against me because I was focusing too much on my plan. Yeah. But we played for 30 minutes and I kept winning, and I would tell her, slow down, let's take a look. You got to learn how to play the game. And I got to give it to her. She didn't give up.
No, man, hey, listen, right when you're out of the womb, prepare to lose. You know, this is a blood-born family. This is a souls-born family, and you're going to learn to appreciate loss. Because I'm not
to life, prepare to die edition.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm crushing it. Like Connect 4. No, I'll be like, you dumb idiot. I won again. Jenga, you got nothing on me.
My favorite thing was looking her dead in the eye as I looked at her not go where she needed to block me, and then before I even put it in, go Connect 4 and watching her eyes go.
Yeah, no, immediate. You're going to start losing. Yeah, these kids, they get medals for everything. No, you're going to earn it. You're going to earn it.
You got to pull it back. Pull it back.
I want to be depressed for a week when I finally lose. That's the goal. I'm not here to go easy on you.
But that depression will come with it's a seedling of pride deep within, right?
No pride. No, just depression. It's like, all right, now I know my kid could kick my butt. You know, that's gonna be.
And at that point, there's no going back. You know, it's the father-son dynamic of your son always being like, I think my dad can whoop my ass.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you ever had those moments when I was growing up. I remember me and my friends, as stupid as it sounds thinking back on it, but I was like 11 and me and my friend were like, my dad is cooler than your dad. My dad would whoop your dad's ass.
Mm-hmm.
Stupid. But you gotta think your dad's super infallible and cool until one day you realize I could totally throw hands on my dad and take it on.
Yeah. If he's walking down the stairs first, I could give him a good shove. Like, he doesn't know what's coming to him. You know, it's
been a paradigm shift. He's got bad knees and a bad back now.
Exactly. It's all on me now. But no, honestly, that's awesome that you're spending time with your nephews playing games. Like, they're cool with it. They're hip to the video games.
They love it. And actually, just because it's a big thing, because we talked about Gran Turismo 7, it was all in whenever I had my racing wheel set up. Because of the way my gaming room is set up, I have to move my coffee table. It's a big process to get it set up. And so that day I'd been working because I'm remodeling a house. So whenever I got done, we came over. He's like, "Can we play games?" I said, "Yeah, I told you I'd let you." So I said, "We'll play a racing game, Hot Wheels Unleashed." He loves Hot Wheels, but he loves playing Gran Turismo 7 in the racing chair. So I'll be the gas cool. and the brake, but he'll do all the driving.
That's awesome. Okay, see that's beautiful. It's awesome because you're the uncle. Then you get to have all the fun with him, feed him all the sugar, and then you just like throw him back to the parents. Like, here you go, have fun, champ.
Yeah, you know? I like when I get to do that with my daughter. Like, send her off somewhere and be like, "Ha, you get to take care of her." I love my daughter. But as is always the case, kids can be a lot sometimes. And they're out for Thanksgiving this week. So it's been a hectic time.
Nobody has been able to sell me parenthood good. Because everybody's like, "I'm tired. My back hurts. I have no free time. It's soul crushing." And I'm like, "Oh, that sounds awful." He's like, best feeling in the world, man. I'm like, "Really?" Because this sounds like a whole lot of chores I don't want to do.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it soul crushing. It's hard work that is very rewarding when you see the fruits of your labor come out. Yeah. But a lot of it is that I am a very playful person by nature, and my wife just really isn't. So my wife is more strictly nurture, whereas I'm really the rough and tumble play. So I do that kind of play with her. I play dolls with her. I danced with her yesterday. I have zero clue how to dance, but she was insistent that we needed to dance and she wanted to have fun. So we sit there and choreographed a whole dance, and it was a goofy dance. We were having fun while we were doing it. But it is interesting because my wife's not big on games either. She doesn't mind them, but she's the way she is. Yeah, she's not big on play. That's just not like, she likes to joke and have a little bit of fun, but she's not big on actual play, like physical play of any kind. Gotcha. She'll do it if she needs to. Like, typically when I'm doing the podcast, she'll fill in the role and play with her, play dolls and Barbies, but that almost always has fallen on me. So in one way, it's like I have a daughter, but I've raised her just in the way that I live my life to some degree. So I give in to her wants, but in a way, she's also got very typically boy-driven hobbies to a degree. Not all the way. Like, I wouldn't call her a tomboy or anything like that. She's very girly when she feels the need to do so. She likes princesses and stuff, but she's also like, me and her have had a $1.50 bet on who's going to win each other against wrestling. So we've been like punching each other in the living room and downing each other. And every week we just passed $1.50 to whoever won,
Your wife's like, "Could you please not suplex our daughter into the dining room? She has to learn. You can't just
only
win
learn
in life."
one way. Yeah,
exactly.
No, I get her on the ropes, and then I come in with the the what is it, 369? That I don't watch enough wrestling. Okay.
No, same here. I know suplex, and that's about as far as I go. RKO.
Rey
oh my god, to see her
is that
RKO? Yeah. That'd be her hitting the ground.
Loved wrestling, so I just love sitting back and going, wow.
Hey, real talk too. Speaking of like video game, because I've been playing another game called Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2.
Look at you go.
I know. I'm pretty much MLG Pro. Humble brag. But I've come to the realization, wow, there's these kids out there that are showing me my age, and I don't really appreciate it anymore. Like, I'm getting. I don't know if you've come to the realization, but like, I'm not great at video games like I used to be anymore. Like, I'm still good, don't get me wrong, but like, some of these kids are doing the drop shot 360 no scopes, and I just can't. I can't compete anymore. I don't know.
I think that I get what you're saying, but I think the difference comes that you have adult responsibilities.
Sure.
And this is what I'd say. I bet if you could put as much time as they are to that being the only game you play, you could get there. Because I have a coworker who's 35 who plays exclusively Call of Duty. That's it. That's all he ever plays. he's really good because he's never trying to pull that gameplay skill across multiple, types of games. He played God of War Ragnarok, but he beat it in a weekend and then immediately was back on. Yeah. And he did no side content. That's not that he loves games, but like those types of games, he beats the story and moves on. He's never had a platinum because he doesn't care about side stuff or doing that. I think the game he's done the most extra stuff in, ironically, is The Witcher 3. He beat both DLCs, but he literally just beat the main story of each DLC and then the main story of the game.
So I got a question for you.
Thing. Yeah, go ahead.
And maybe this could go for another question down the road, but when it comes to trophies, are you the trophy hunter? Like, I have this game, so I need to plat this game? Or are you like me, where it's just like, I have to love this game in order to have platinumed it?
Yeah, like, Chris is the trophy hunter. Now, he doesn't platinum every game, but he approaches every game with the intent to platinum, and then he moves from there. I approach every game of, I'm going to play this game. I'm going to have fun. And then if I fall in love with the game, it will have earned my passion for me to push forward to getting a platinum. And there's actually some fun questions in relation to that we'll get to here in a little bit.
Okay.
But are you much on? So you trophy hunt, but you're not what you would call a trophy hunter necessarily?
No, I would say like I platinum anywhere between like 2 to 5 games every year. So like
I'm a little higher than that.
Yeah, it really has to be a game that I appreciate, I love, and I'm going to attempt to go for the plat. But if I can't, I feel like every trophy hunter has this, or every PlayStation gamer probably has a little something. There is a threshold where it's like, okay, to me, 70% is enough to say that I really love this game. That's if I can't go for the plat, I will go as far as I can. That's my rule.
Let's see. I'm at 8 platinums this year. Oh, not 9, because I platinum 12 minutes as well.
I am at, I believe.
Oh, wait. Doki Doki Literature Club. Was that this year? I don't remember when I got the platinum in that. That game was great.
I am at 3 platinums this year, if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4. But I will have 2 this week because I'm going to platinum Ragnarok and I'm going to platinum Modern Warfare 2. So,
all right.
Yeah. This week I'm crushing it. I know.
Look at you go.
I mean, listen,
cool.
Humble brag, I'm unemployed at the moment, so it works.
Hey, I dream of the day that I can say that for even a week. If I could just, but I make too good of money and I like my freedom in my job. So I rest in this thing where it's like, damn, my family needs me.
My daughter needs to eat cheese.
She needs education and housing. Damn it. So it kind of coming into the fact that this is the Thanksgiving week, and I hope I don't want to say too much, but I have a feeling. I know y'all guys recorded yesterday, correct?
Yep. No, you can let it rip. I just saw it. I just saw the question.
No, you're good. Either way, we're coming into Thanksgiving, and I was hoping that this was going to be, with you filling in, a considerably different type of episode to what I feel like I knew from being behind the scenes what y'all were intending to record yesterday. So with that in mind, we're going to have a little fun with Thanksgiving week coming in. And Awesome Dave 1337, one of our patrons and of course one of our shared audience members, he says, please ask Joe what banger sweet num-nums he is looking forward to on Thanksgiving.
Man, Awesome Dave is kind of a piece of and I'm just here to tell you that as I've met Awesome Dave in real life. We raised money together in Rome, New York, where he consistently trolled me in real life as well as here. So y'all don't know this, but I hate 2 words. I hate many words. And in fact, many things and people. But there are 2 things in particular I can't stand. I hate the word banger. When people like, oh, this is a AAA banger, bangerific. Like this, it's just such a lazy word to describe something. It's a lame attempt to be young, I feel. It's just like, embrace it. Like that's not, like kids are not unironically saying banger. I will, no. They're not saying it. Let's, we're old. Embrace it. Just say this game is stellar. Great. Use words that are just, I don't know, actual words instead of banger. Because, like, if you're in the UK, I found out that means something totally different. So I hate that word. The other word I hate, I don't even know how it came up, but sweet num-nums. Sounds grotesque. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah.
But now my community at the trophy room is the most positive place in the world, but it's getting a little toxic because they know things that I don't like. And so they're just like, we're going to trigger you. So like Sweet Num Nums just freaks me out because I don't like it. I don't like the word.
Is there something maternal about it? Or is there something oddly Freudian about it where it's like you have that thing where it sounds too Freudian. Sexual while sitting?
Because in Rugrats, there was like this one scene, where, like a nightmare scene, I think, and he's like num nums, and I'm like, and that scene freaked me out. So I don't like the word num nums because I think about that kid. And now people are like, sweet num num this, banger that, and I'm like, guys, come on, relax. Yeah. But what's my favorite food on Thanksgiving that I'm looking forward to? Humble brag, my brother is the cook in the house. He's been cooking the turkey for over a decade now. And the last year, slow cooked, we got a smoker. And so he's been smoking the turkey. And let me tell you, oh my God, guys, it is the juiciest piece of meat that you'll ever taste. It's delicious.
Man, I have a smoker that my wife got me for my birthday, and she cooked. And I mean, don't worry, I don't blame this on her. It just happened to be that she cooked and it rained, and I was new to them. I didn't really think about the fact that it's a pellet smoker. I didn't think that you had to take the pellets out. So it rained, and enough water was able to blow into my porch to get into where they're at. So the auger that pushes them out they're just dried in there. And I have yet to be able to get that auger freeze to get everything out. So I can't even use my smoker this year. After I used it for months and was loving it. And I mean, we'd cook burgers. I was like, man, this is the best food I've ever made. And then this happened, and I was like, damn. Yeah. So I was trying to get it worked out before this week, and I tried everything I could. I have one more idea, but that's unfortunate. It's funny. You're talking about banger being a lazy attempt at trying to sound young. I just imagine that there's some dude that you chose to use the word stellar. I imagine there's like some 60-year-old dude who's like, that's just his lame attempt at trying to sound young. He should use a real word like it's a robust game.
These young whippersnappers, they don't understand.
There's always, it's kind of like when people say that everybody's built on the backs of giants. It's like, so if everybody stands on the back of giants, doesn't that mean eventually you become a giant yourself? I mean, it's kind of what it comes down to, which is, I guess, hey, you know what? Nice way to look at the world.
Exactly.
All right. So, Joe, we're going to move ahead into our community's take. And if you do not know, our community's take is where we, at the end of the previous episode, form a question that we ask to the community at large and have them send back their thoughts so that we can get differing views and opinions that may align with ours, may not, and they kind of gives a good position for people to be able to push back against us and helps us stay kind of in line with some of the more general gaming populace. So to be part of the community's take, you can follow us on social media. We're over on Twitter at Triangle SQRD. You can find us in a Facebook group called Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. If you ask to be entered in over there, I'll gladly let you in. And then lastly, you can always find us in our Discord, which we have linked in the description below. There is a dedicated community's take section where we ask the question and you can answer. So with that in mind, we always give priority reading to our patrons who go over to patreon.com/Nartech and give us as little as $1 per month. It's a huge help, helps us keep the show going. I know that I can speak for Joe and Kyle as well when we say that having the burden of having to think about those aspects taken off your back really helped keep the show a little more jovial and fun. And it's just a nice thing to know that you can keep the lights on, metaphorically. So with that in mind, Joe, the question from last week that we asked was, with plenty of people looking at the Game Awards, timely, and questioning why games that released shortly after the cutoff last year were, in their opinion, skipped over for nominations by and large, when do you think an ideal time to give awards are for games? Early January, so all the 2022 games can be accounted for, some other time, or is the current setup fine? Do you have a different idea? So over on Twitter, and I think this is someone new to the show, so I like to highlight people who I notice are newer, potentially listening and interacting. Dorian the Critic. Does that sound familiar to you, Joe?
No. Hello, Dorian. Welcome aboard, mate.
Yeah, he says, in my opinion, an ideal time to give out the awards would be somewhere around the middle of the following year. Ooh, okay. That way, all of the nominated games would at least have half a year in the market, and thus a certain amount of exposure to the public. That's interesting. And I think it brings us around to a question of what should Game Awards be for? And, Kyle last week talked about DICE and how there's kind of the more developer-oriented awards where it's developers giving awards within their own industry. And then there's more of the consumer-facing awards. And I guess the question there is, what should dictate the consumer-facing awards? Because a lot of what we see is that it's people who are just media figures within gaming who are answering on our behalf. But then that does bring up a very reasonable question of who are we all to say that they should speak for gaming at large? And not to say that they can't or shouldn't, but he really paints a picture of looking more at making sure that more people who are actually the intended market have gotten time with it. What do you think of that?
I like where their head's at, because to me, it removes the business aspect of what these award shows really are. And, we talked a little bit about it on last week's episode of the Trophy Room, which is, there's the business element of all these things. We look at the Jeff Keighley Award show as the de facto award show when we technically really shouldn't, because it's just one of several that the mainstream news outlets give out. But his is the most prominent because he does such a good job at marketing this show. So you think of it as the Oscars when in actuality, is it? I don't really think so. But I would say this: if there wasn't a marketing element or a business element, this show needs to be put together each and every year. It needs to be paid for. It needs to, fund editors, hosts, and all that stuff. Get their paychecks rolling. Yeah, then middle of next year sounds great, or even February. Like the Oscars is usually like January, February, like around there, so that you get away from the recency bias from some of the big games that launch in the holiday. But the sad reality of it is that the Game Awards is still small. It still needs to grow, and it still needs that cash flow. So, to reference another show I'm on called Cast Co-op over at Season Gaming over on YouTube, our good buddy Ains made the point of, a lot of these companies have the most ad spend during the holiday season. So it's easier for Jeff to go to these, possible advertisers to throw money their way or his way, because they already have so much in the bank right now willing to give, that if he asks in the beginning of the year, that ad spend is significantly lower. So that's the sad business aspect of things. So for me, I actually have it's ever evolving, so stick with me. But currently, my thoughts is I don't really mind the cutoff as long as the cutoff makes sense, which I feel like this year it doesn't, because there are so many games that just came out that somehow didn't make the cutoff, though it is the 18th, that were stellar games. And I think of games like Pentiment not being in Best Narrative as something that is very questionable why it's not there. I'll be the surrogate here for Kyle and say there are some sports games like MLB The Show that are legitimately great that aren't here. So to me, I feel like the misses are that the games that have already come out that are legitimately great are missing in certain categories, and that's having us scratching our heads at the moment. That makes any sense.
I think that's fair.
Sorry, that was a TED Talk.
No, dude, that's fair. That's fine. I like a lot of what you said. Last week, as you mentioned on your show, I had said that the sad reality of everything is that business and art seldom flow together well. And that is the truth. At the end of the day, ad dollars drive everything. So I can understand that. But I think no matter what, because it would put the burden on us as a group of gamers at large. The only way you'd ever get something approaching what you're even wanting would be for a lot of people to do this completely out of their own pocket with no intentions of getting money back. And that's just a little too idealistic. Yeah. As much as I love the idea, it's something that in practice is seldom going to work that way.
And if I could just spitball another thing where people will maybe throw a pitchfork or two at me is, I don't want gamers to decide it. Like, I don't want this to be by popular vote. Like, we just saw the Golden Joysticks just came out, which is another award show. And somehow on God's green perfect earth, Elden Ring won best multiplayer game. And listen, I'm a Soulsborne fanatic. I've platinum Elden Ring. I love FromSoftware. But best multiplayer game? A FromSoftware game? Let's relax. So, to me, I do trust, I do have some faith in institutions like the outlets that we currently have. And maybe there's some bias because I know a few people that work at them that I trust the process enough that, I don't want mainstream gamers to have that much of an influence because we are very fickle and loyal at the same exact time folk. Like if we want Elden Ring to win, we will get Elden Ring to win everything. We will make Dogecoin happen as just a meme. We're very chaotic, I think, is the word I really want to use.
It's funny because I think sometimes the weirdest groups of people have that quality. On the music side of things, I'm actually ironically wearing the shirt. Coheed and Cambria is a really they've grown a lot in recent years. They're a great band. I love them. Yeah. But if you look at their fan base, they don't have to do anything. Their fan base mobilizes themselves to where even competitions against some of the largest bands that are social media based and stuff, they just blow it out of the water. Because it's like they vote constantly, they spread it with everybody, and they're like, everyone who likes Coheed vote. And all they're doing is getting all of these niche people to work towards one goal, when, as we all know, the sad reality of voting, whether it be political or just hobbyist things, is that a vast majority of the population just don't vote. It doesn't matter what it's for. So seldom are votes even truly indicative of what the majority of people want. It's just interesting how you can really make a certain group of people really storm off in one direction. So if you wanted Stray to win every award and you could get enough people who adored Stray, you could probably make that happen.
Yes.
Realistically, if you just knew where to set things off, you could probably make that happen to where the whole award ceremony is Stray wins best music, Stray wins best art, Stray wins best voice acting.
What the? That Cap did perform its butt off there, but yeah.
The idea of a write-in vote for gaming awards is wild to think of. All right, moving on. Rude Days 93, one of our patrons, longtime patron at this point, he says the most fair way would definitely be have it at the beginning of January. That way, everything in the year would be included, and everyone would have time to play some of those games during the holiday break. End of the day, though, there's always going to be big snubs. Modern Warfare 2 is the most popular game in the world now and is never considered a Game of the Year contender. Last year, Forza Horizon 5 had the highest rated Metacritic and wasn't nominated. I do understand why these games weren't nominated, but it's odd to say that the Game of the Year awards did not include the highest selling and highest rated games in the category, which kind of circles back to what we're saying is that, sales don't equate to everything, but in a world where business is something, it kind of does matter to a degree. But if anything, the fact that Call of Duty seems to almost always miss award shows seems like it's the industry trying to balance out the fact that it's so big. Yeah. But I struggle with that because Fortnite has won enough stuff and it's huge too. It's bigger than Call of Duty, arguably. At least it has been in its height. So
that's a good argument. I think when you bring up Fortnite, it's a really good argument because Call of Duty sells well, but is it the best game? Best in sales, I don't think there are a good comparison. Madden sells a bunch, but when you see how it's rated year in, year out, it's swimming in 6s and 7s, and it's comfortable with that because the game sells so well. When you take a look at Call of Duty, you take a look at its Open Critic, and it's swimming in 7s as well. Sometimes a low 8, but it's a perfectly fine game that the masses really dig and enjoy, and there's a huge following to it. So, to me, I'm more concerned about the Forza Horizon 5, which is a legitimately stellar game. It is constantly some of the best racing out there. As a novice, I can even appreciate that game for what it does, definitely in its sound department. So to me, I'm surprised, that it got snubbed. So I think the the true thing about the awards right now this year is I think that they need to have a rethink about not how when the cutoff is, but a rethink of what do these categories really mean? Who's really on there? Because it seems like to me it is a weird popularity contest, because Stray should not be up for Game of the Year. I love Stray. I platted that game. But to me, I'm like, there are a lot of better indie games out there than Stray. And is Stray in there because it hits an SEO, algorithm type of thing? That's what I'm kind of thinking. I think that's where the true problem is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we were talking about it's a terrible reason to choose a game as someone who loves games. It's a fantastic reason to choose a game as someone who's worried about business. So moving on, I want to do another one, and I put Jehudis in here first and foremost because he's a patron, and thank you, Jehudi. Been listening for forever. But I like that he is actually one of the, more or less, he's landing on the flip side argument in that ultimately it makes sense as to why it's here. So he says, I see their point of having this celebration in December, as most major games would have been released by that point. Logically, it's better to do it in January, but otherwise, December is a good month given the holiday, people looking into buying consoles games. And maybe they'll stumble upon the Game Awards to find the next big game. And I think what's interesting is he's not really looking at that from the perspective of the value for companies or even the Game Awards itself. He's saying that flip that and look at the value to consumers. The value to consumers is that it drives all sorts of things to help you get things that you need. There's Game Awards sales. Games that get nominated tend to go on steep sale, and they're normally some of the best games that year, or at least have a high chance of working for a large chunk of gamers. And then, of course, you have the visibility that brings to certain things. So it can give somebody that moment of, hey, I didn't know what that was. And then I saw it on here. And even if I just saw the nomination in passing on Twitter, it brought something new to my mind at a time of the year where I had time to play it with the holidays, or I had the money, whatever it may be. So that's an interesting flip side argument. And I like how everyone's kind of saying, like, for us as fans, logically, we can see early the next year. But I think everyone kind of contends with the fact that the business is unfortunate, but reasonable. But I like that this is a little more optimistic for consumers.
Yeah, I really dig that as well. It's a good argument when you talk about like what we talked about earlier about ad spend. Like, when do people have money to spend? Typically holidays. So like celebration
not
of games,
just
something,
corporations, but consumers.
Yeah. So like they see, hell, we'll take Stray one more time. Like, wow, okay, this cat game, now I got to check it out. Let's see what it's all about. I mean, I know so many people, like, I think you mentioned it prior, like with Hades. So like, to me, I like where Derek's head's at. I tend to agree with that logic.
With Jehudi, but Derek is the next one up on the list.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. Yeah, I had to scroll down the notes. I'm sorry, I'm bad.
Yeah,
Jehudi,
no, you're fine.
You have all the credit. You're smart. Derek, we're going to see you in a second. Let's see where your head's at.
Derek says January makes more sense. By holding it in December, they probably don't have time to consider anything made after November 14th or so. So it's really the game of the past 11 months, not a year. Derek's a longtime listener, longtime patron. Derek, hope you're doing well, you and that family of yours. Sure. Yeah, I think that you said something that I think is probably the closest thing to a quick and easy answer for this, is that the cutoff ultimately doesn't matter if the cutoff tries in all reality to hit the majority of games. And then secondarily, if you do not allow the cutoff to mean that games that slightly miss it are just snubbed the next year due to nothing more than time. Because they're really, the only flip argument to this that I think is crazy, and I haven't played the game in a long time, so this is not a value judgment on my part, but I adored Halo Infinite when it first came out. The story, the campaign was pretty good. Sure. The most fun I had was in the very linear sections I thought the open world was kind of boring, but they swung and they tried. I mean, Final Fantasy 15 did the same thing. They tried and succeeded in various aspects, failed in many others, but the multiplayer was fantastic. And it's funny that the game, for me personally, the reason I even stopped playing it was strictly that every week it would get worse. Yeah. The content would not get updated enough. They wouldn't add enough. They'd have a pretty bad battle pass, in all honesty. But then more importantly, the thing that really knocked me out of it was that they kept having netcode issues to where every week it was like the problem would worsen and worsen. And boards online were talking about how the issue with lag in the server meant that you could be in front of someone, melee them, and the game would register it that you smacked them in the back of the head. And that's a one-shot melee. But everything you saw and everything that the other person saw was like, that doesn't add up. So it's like, it was frustrating because playing the game correctly just became an issue. And then there wasn't enough support. They weren't really answering questions. So it fell out of my graces. And the irony is that the cutoff might have actually somehow been beneficial to having Halo Infinite be looked at far more positively in 2021 than it now would be looked at in 2022, just because it's lived long enough to have people see the flaws. And it's like the inverse of recency bias, where enough time has passed and the product continues to evolve in enough ways that you go, even if it was great at first, it couldn't keep that momentum, and now it wouldn't deserve that same credit in December of 2022 as it would have maybe in January or December of 2021.
Because if they moved that date up for Halo Infinite, it would absolutely have been like last year's multiplayer game. They're like, oh, they nailed it. But then like after December and after so many promises then broken or pushed back, and I'm a huge Halo fan as well. You just get disheartened. And I dropped that game, I believe, in March, and I have not gone back because of it. And it hurts in that regard. So I really like where your head's at here, because to me, it is like the inverse of recency bias. So like, we've seen it for all of its flaws and for all of its shortcomings and all of its things it does right. And now because we have more time with it, maybe it doesn't belong here. And
which I guess is the logical continuation of something like recency bias, is that you have less time. Recency bias is happening because you've had less time to be more critical on something or let it sit with you and really process it. And games from the beginning of the year, no matter how great you felt like they were when you're off the high of playing them, you've had time to sit with them and go, this is where they succeeded gratefully, and this is where maybe they could have done something a little bit better. And naturally, God of War is a good example of a game that's not going to rightfully get enough of that treatment. Not saying it doesn't deserve anything that it gets, but it's, no matter what, I don't think anyone could strongly argue that people had enough time to sit with that game and really stew on it. And that's where some of the value of that 6 months later into the year that the first response did comes into play, because it's true. It would allow recency bias to kind of be away from the picture. And it would also allow launch hype to be out of the picture, because it's easy to feel high on a game when you're on social media and everyone else is like, this game is amazing. You're getting positive affirmation. When you've had time to sit by yourself and be like, what do I personally think of this game free of noise?
Yeah. And to me, it's kind of what we're going through right now with the Trophy Room Awards, is we're making it. We're debating on the cutoff because, for us, it's like, okay, so if we put it in December 13th, then realistically, we're looking at it through the lens of getting seen, getting noticed. So like, we don't know when, in the realest of reals, because we love being transparent on the Trophy Room, is like, we don't know when these community managers leave and go out on their Christmas vacation or holiday break or whatever have you. And so we want to strike when the iron's hot, while at the same exact time giving as many games as we can a shot. So we're taking a look at the Callisto Protocol, a game I'm super excited for. I'm a huge Dead Space stan, so seeing the spiritual successor, oh my God, amazing. But we're thinking about putting it on November 29th as the cutoff. And there's a conversation Kyle and I had that we didn't necessarily agree on. I'm like, you know what? I think it's more exciting if we have Callisto for next year's award show, because that category is going to be so stacked. It's going to be really interesting to see. You have Dead Space, Callisto, Resident Evil, hopefully, Silent Hill, all in there, all competing. All of these games are made by incredible developers and incredible IP. Let's see them duke it out. He has a lot of
juggernaut IP.
Yeah. And so like, to me, I'm like, that's an exciting pick. While Kyle's just like, nah, because it's going to be so far away. But I'm like, Kyle, all these horror games for the most part are going to come out by March or April. So I think there's going to be enough time to really stew on all these things. So no date is going to be perfect, but I do understand that there's rhymes and reasons as to why they're there.
Well, and you keep touching on the real reality of the best part of everything is specifically that we exist. we get to act as a voice for a smaller niche group of people to where they look at what we say in a different light than what someone else says. And I think it's interesting because I don't think it puts an undue pressure on me to try and make sure that I'm looking at certain games that they're going to want to hear, because I don't care. I like what I like, and I'm going to say the game that I like. If it's truly my game of the year, that's going to be it. Greedfall and The Plague Tale were very high up on my list in the year they came out. And not to say that wasn't on anyone's list, but in a year where a bunch of other games came out, typically the heavy hitters are the ones that people tend to throw around in conversation. Like when we've talked about this, everyone's talking about the obvious, God of War and Elden Ring. Horizon is kind of thrown back and forth for some people. But it is more interesting when you can come and say, like, my game of the year is this odd side game that maybe you didn't hear of, but here's why it was amazing. And being able to be that voice is cool. But to round this out real quick, our last one comes from patron Mark Schutz. He says, early January seems ideal to me. Otherwise, it's not the full year. And no game released late this year. We'll get a sniff when the nominees are announced next year. Callisto Protocol is probably one of those, unfortunately. We'll have to see. So, in wrapping that up, this is kind of an odd question that I think is fun that comes from one of our patrons, Rude Days 93. He says, let's have a mini 2023 preview. From the Game Awards category, most anticipated game, so that's for this year, Starfield, Zelda 2 or Tears of the Kingdom, Hogwarts Legacy, Final Fantasy 16, and Resident Evil 4. What do you think is the percentage chance that your personal 2023 game of the year will come from that list of games? And percentage chance could be whatever you want.
Right. I'm just a little insulted Spider-Man wasn't there. Why Spider-Man
Even
not
though
there?
they keep saying it's next year.
They say it's next year, and I believe them. I'm going to say something very... as typical trophy room fashion, I'm going to say something rather harsh, but I feel like it's correct. I'm steadfast in my beliefs, dang it, and I would be swayed otherwise. Starfield doesn't look great, and I'm tired of people saying this looks amazing. I thought
Starfield looked awful when they showed it, and I love Bethesda, or at least I've loved many of Bethesda's last games. But here's the kicker: this past generation, Bethesda Game Studios specifically, Bethesda as a publisher has put out some amazing games. Deathloop, Dishonored 2. I mean, dude, they are knocking it out of the water, and sadly, they weren't getting many of the sales that they rightfully deserved, in my opinion. Same. But when we're talking about the games that did sell massively, I thought Fallout 4 was a fine game, but ultimately disappointing for what the potential should have been. I thought Fallout 76 was quite a mess. We went an entire generation with no Elder Scrolls at all. And the only other thing we have coming from them is Starfield. And I think Starfield looks woefully behind the times. When they first showed it, I thought it looked like a graphics mod for No Man's Sky. And I know that was a commonly held thing, but I genuinely feel like when that came when they came on, I was like, what am I looking at here?
Why this looks like a less smooth Cyberpunk in terms of combat. Like it just nothing about Starfield gives me faith. And the more Todd Howard talks about it, the less faith I have in the project because I feel like his eyes are way too big for his stomach. And I think Fallout 4 proves that. And again, you could throw all your daggers at me. I don't care. Just don't miss. I think Redfall really deserves more of the love because Arcane, you mentioned Deathloop, is stellar. And this is the Prey team working on a multiplayer co-op shooter. The way they play with level design, and the fact that it's open world, I am just so excited to see what that game's going to look like.
I'll tell you, I'm excited, but I'm hesitantly excited just because on the surface, it's not a game that screams like something I'd be interested in, right? And I think some of that came from the fact that they showed a really cool, when they first announced it, they showed a great CG trailer, but I felt like it gave no sense as to what the game was truly going to be. And then we saw, and I'm not judging the game fully off of this, that's why I've made the term, but we saw that very rough-looking leaked footage early this year that looked terrible. Now, it's leaked gameplay, but the type of gameplay that it showed made me start going, even if the game's good, I don't know if it'll be something I like. And then when they showed it yet again in a more presentable form, when E3 came around, I was like, I'm back in the sense of, I'm willing to let it surprise me. I will buy this. I will play this.
Yeah, leaked stuff doesn't scare me off because it's leaked alpha. So I didn't even look at it. I saw one screen. I was like, that's enough. So for me, if we're talking about the categories here, Hogwarts Legacy looks great, but I don't know Harry Potter, and I believe Harry Potter in my soul, my heart of hearts is the West Wing for nerds, because all I see these kids doing are talking about magic in hallways while they're headed to class. Final Fantasy 16. Now, guys, I know I host a PlayStation show. You think I'd be about Final Fantasy, but I am a new Final Fantasy fan. 7 Remake got me through the door. This game, from everything I've seen, has me super excited. But the game that has me is Resident Evil 4. The fact that they got the original guys to help, produce this game, I'm really excited to see where they take this game, because I am also a semi-new Resident Evil fan. I got in with 7, which I thought was stellar. That was my truest entry point. I played through Resident Evil 4, and I see where the greatness is there. But for me, playing old games is definitely hard and jarring for me. So I would love to see this game in a more modern lens of how they go about some of the story beats. So I think Resident Evil 4 to me has the biggest chance of winning me over than any of these games on this list.
So if you had a percentage chance of that, you think Resident Evil 4 across every game that releases next year, what is your percentage chance that you think your game of the year will come from this list? So if Resident Evil 4 is the one from this list that you think has the highest chance, when you compare it against the rest of the year that you know is coming, at least currently.
I'll say in heart of hearts, if Spider-Man launches this year, it's like a 20% chance.
Okay.
20% chance. Spidey, okay. I love Spider-Man. And that game was incredible. So Spidey all the way.
All right, cool. My answer, I agree with you. I think Starfield, I'm willing to let Starfield, because I have Game Pass and it'll be free. I'm willing to try Starfield, but I have almost no interest in it.
Yeah.
I am also one of the people that I can see why people love Breath of the Wild. I don't see it as a 10 out of 10 game. I probably never will. I think that's a very solid 8.5 out of 10 game that I also just didn't
Brett, we're
happen
so
to enjoy.
alike, it's kind of freaking me out at this point.
I think Sean One Neo knew something whenever he suggested this. He knew. But so Zelda 2 has nothing for me. And, the recent Pokemon performance has, I'm not saying it's anything crazy, but I think it's really showing that Switch is nearing a point where there has to be an answer as to what it's going to be. So I'm almost curious if we see Tears of the Kingdom be Breath of the Wild for their new system, where it releases on Switch, but there's a better, easily more enjoyed version on a new console. Whatever you want to call that. I hope
that's the case. Because I tried playing, I love Splatoon 2. It's one of my favorite multiplayer games, actually. And Splatoon 3, I lost all faith in everything, because I can't get into a gosh dang match. So for me, I'm seeing even the Pokemon performance, and I'm just like, I don't know. I'm a little nervous. I really do hope the new hardware comes out sooner rather than later, and that is, you're right, a cross-gen game.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's actually benefits to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really cool with cross-gen games at launch.
Yep.
At launch of a system. I was totally happy to be like, yeah, of course I'll play Sackboy's Big Adventure on PS5, and it looks and runs better than it would on PS4. I'm happy with that. Yeah. But it is always nice to have a true exclusive at launch too. So looking at this, I think Final Fantasy 16 and Hogwarts Legacy, I'm not a huge Harry Potter person either. And I think that's what's interesting is Hogwarts Legacy is pulling me despite me not being a huge Harry Potter fan.
Same.
So I'm trying to give it a little bit of its due diligence there. So with that in mind, I'm going to say, with what we know is coming next year, assuming nothing moves and changes, I'd say 30% chance that my game comes from this list. But two out of the 5 are not looking hot for me personally.
Yeah. Same. Big same.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and move into the news. The first thing that we're going to talk about in the news is actually in relation to God of War Ragnarok. So in news that is likely to be taken far too seriously, even though it's cool, God of War Ragnarok director Eric Williams appeared on a Kind of Funny spoiler cast for the game and made a comment about the next game he personally would like to work on. He said, quote, "You guys can make it happen because you have the audience of the world here. I don't know what I'm doing next, but if somebody gives me that Castlevania license, we would love to make that," end quote. Castlevania, of course, has been a dormant franchise outside of the collections since the release of Lords of Shadow 2 back in 2014. That game was heavily debated, despite the fact that the first one was actually a rather loved first starting point. With Konami potentially overcommitting to a revitalization of Silent Hill with 3 games, arguably 4. Chris, you funny guy. Movies and TV shows, it wouldn't take walking through a Mystic Gateway to find a realm where a Sony/Konami collaboration on Castlevania makes sense. These comments come a few days after Williams told the LA Times that he would be happy to commit his life to Kratos and work on the franchise for his life, which is a crazy sentence.
Yeah.
Hopefully that works out better for Eric than it does to the women who committed their lives to their love of the God of War. Oh, he also says that it is unlikely that God of War 5 will receive DLC, which, let's be honest, God of War has never had DLC.
Yeah.
This is not surprising. If there was ever going to be a chance to, maybe, but coming off of what is the end of a mythology, or this saga as they're calling it, I almost struggle to see how you'd approach a DLC without it being something. I can't talk too much.
Exactly.
But there's specifically a little section of stuff at the end of the new game that if you told me that you were making a Left Behind style DLC,
yes,
I personally would be interested, because I think that supplemental stuff would end up helping my enjoyment of Ragnarok that much more.
Yeah.
But so going back to the Castlevania thing, there was that long running rumor that Sony was in talks with Konami to get exclusive use of their licenses, not to necessarily buy Konami, but to partner with them and say, listen, we'll take your great IP with our great studios. We know how to choose studios to make games. You'll make your money without having to worry about publishing the games or whatever it be. In looking at that, I've always said personally that I didn't think that Sony would be too up for the idea of giving even beloved license like IP to their biggest studios like Naughty Dog, Sony Santa Monica, and as has recently become the case, to some degree, Guerrilla Games, and of course Sucker Punch. Because there's a lot of value in their existing IP, and I think, as we've talked about, you of course want to see more Ghosts and the idea behind Ghosts. And of course, people want to see what Naughty Dog has got up their sleeve. They're already working on new IPs for this. So how likely do you think it would be that not only something like this could happen in terms of Sony getting the license to work with, but more importantly, giving it to one of their biggest studios? Do you think that that's how Sony would approach reviving something like that? Or do you think that they would realize that ultimately Castlevania is still, in modern gaming terms, it's niche in comparison to new games in terms of market draw and appeal?
I think because it's niche, it probably has the biggest chance. I feel like if your game isn't a Marvel property, Sony wants to own the IP. That's their MO, because it's kind of like with EA as well. One of their issues was with the Star Wars IP, them being drawn to an IP that they didn't own, that Disney could pull the rug out from under them. And that's why once they got the deal with Star Wars, or with Disney, they were so apprehensive with that IP, because there were so many movers and shakers that were dictating things from their own company. So the IP has to be either incredibly huge, like a Spider-Man, or it has to be incredibly niche to have that shot. For Spider-Man, I mean, just look at how it's sold. It's one of the top selling franchises that PlayStation has made. So they're okay with not necessarily owning Spider-Man, because they also know that Insomniac could turn around and make something really stellar as well. But I feel like the commitment between Marvel and Sony is probably incredibly close and tight and benefiting Sony, that I think they're comfortable with not owning it. When it comes to Castlevania, I don't think you throw that to Santa Monica. I actually think, because he said this is not going to happen. Because to me, I feel like, no, you give Castlevania to Blue Point, you give, You give it to one of their smaller-esque teams that are known to make something out of, a foundation. So to me, I see this like you throw it to a Housemarque, you throw it to a Blue Point, you throw it at a smaller team, you have it be a smaller scope, and you see what happens there, or even just throwing it over to an XDev partner to help make that game. Because I feel like with their known or popular, whatever the word you want to use, studios, like a Santa Monica or a Naughty Dog, no, they're making their own thing. They're 100% making their own thing. Where like I could see this happening with Castlevania and Blue Point. I could absolutely see that happening. But they're off doing something. So I don't want to rule it out. I think the deal has to be incredibly favorable for Sony for them to even consider it.
Well, I think the other thing is when you're dealing with legacy IP, which is arguably what Castlevania is. Like people know Castlevania by name. Many people don't know it by playing it. We had mentioned before we got on to the show that you had never played Castlevania. And I think a really interesting launching point right now to look at how Castlevania would do in a modern audience, even with, to some degree, the Netflix series is amazing, actually. It's really good. Yeah. And I think it's drawn more people either back to the franchise who already loved it or new people to the franchise. So you would get some of that cross-media namesake, benefits.
Absolutely.
But Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which is the closest thing to a modern Castlevania game that we've had in a long time, that and of course the other Bloodstained game that they did that was more of a 2D Castlevania like game as well, only sold about 1 million copies. It sold a little bit over 1 million last I can remember them updating. And as much as people who are longtime fans and love Castlevania don't want to think that, the reality is that modern gaming is so much bigger than previous gaming that even a behemoth franchise from 20 years ago doesn't really stand up to the IP power of modern stuff. I wish it wasn't always that way. Castlevania is a great franchise with a lot of opportunity. But then legacy IP, you deal with that issue of trying to do something with the IP, but you're always going to be stuck between two fan bases. Fan bases who are new and coming in and want to try something different, but also know that it's part of something that's weighed down by previous games. And then people who don't want anything that's too far off from the original games. And that's part of why Lords of Shadow 2 got so derided. Lords of Shadow 1 was more Bloodborne-y.
Yep.
Not exactly, but it was closer. And I remember people being pretty favorable to that game and being like, this is cool. It's a good starting point. And then Lords of Shadow 2 tried to further that. And people were like, no, absolutely not.
Enough. And that's the thing. Yeah. Like whatever this game has to do, it has to deviate from what we've known or the idea, the germ of what a Castlevania is. Because you're right. The sales, 1 million is great for an indie dev and all that. But like, Sony first party, no, that needs a sturdy push, marketing wise to get it through the door. So for me, again, one of the smaller teams for sure, but it also has to deviate from what, maybe it is closer to a Lords of Shadow than what you typically think of a Castlevania game to be.
Mm-hmm. And I think in a modern setup, that would be the closest thing you'd get. The reality of something that I don't think people talk about, but this is a really interesting viewpoint of looking at what God of War 2018 was actually so successful at. It was super successful at taking an already beloved and successful IP that had started to wane in popularity, because Ascension on PS3 did not sell very well. No. It was still a good game, but it was dealing with all sorts of issues. It's a prequel to a story that's already wrapped up. It's hard to feel like there's any weight to anything. Prequels always have that issue because it's like, I know that nothing happens. There's no true sense of danger because I saw that the third game happen. I know that he has to live to make this point of the game. So with those things in mind, I think it's really interesting that God of War was able to straddle that line about as well as anything could have, to where it mostly successfully bridged the gap between people who loved the original God of War games and people who were willing to take a chance on a God of War game that was doing something considerably different.
Yep.
Yeah. So that same kind of, you'd have to catch that lightning in a bottle again with Castlevania. And who knows how successful you could be, But I almost think the interesting thing would be, Sony is investing in FromSoft alongside Tencent to make games happen. And I actually think that if you could get FromSoft to make Castlevania as a partnered second-party game that was exclusive to you, that would be probably the best you could get. I think most people would be happy.
I think it, because everybody kind of equates Souls games to being what the modern day of a Castlevania would be. So like, yeah, I feel like most people would be down on it. I think you have to ask Miyazaki of how he would feel on that, right? Of how he wants it. This is not an IP he owns, and I know that was something with Bloodborne that he had issue with, of him not owning that IP. So for me, it also comes down to they got Elden Ring, so they're busy, but Miyazaki also doesn't like to make sequels to things. So even if Castlevania is a huge success, would they even be around for the sequel?
Yeah, the most you'd get is a Dark Souls 2 situation of a non-Miyazaki led game, and then the novelty of it being a FromSoft game. That's actually something that I hope FromSoft can eventually get away from. Not because Miyazaki's not important. Every game he's made has been mostly amazing. Even if I don't I fell off of both Elden Ring and Sekiro, but I think they're both great games that just didn't sink their hooks into me for some reason. And I'm willing to revisit both of them. I just have to make time.
I planted Sekiro. Humble brag. Nice. I don't like to brag, but I'm pretty much champion gamer over here.
Chris did too. And it's interesting because Chris is he's a prime example of how it can happen, where he thought he hated that game, basically. Same. And then he kind of went back to it, and suddenly he had the platinum. And it was like, I don't know how it happened, but it just became, which, for Chris's sake, I think part of it was that he went into it like, this is a hard platinum to get. I'm going to approach it as I'm trying to get the platinum. And interestingly, I think that challenge drove him to love the challenge of the game, because I watched him just continuously fight some of these bosses like he was share playing, which is still a feature I adore.
Amazing. Yeah.
And it was really cool to see him beat a particular boss when he was going over and over and over, and it was just cool to see it come through. So, yeah, I think there was a lot of aspects at play there, but that'll be an interesting one to see. Do you have anything else you'd want to say in regards to those?
No, I'm good. I not gonna happen. He said it. He said it out loud. It's not happening.
You ruined the magic. Yeah, you needed to do the Todd Howard, well, I just want to make a Fallout game to your boss and then let them come back and put a sticky note on your desk. Did you ever hear that story where he talks about how they ended up with Fallout's IP? Interesting. Next thing up, in an odd collaboration, Sony and Honda are working on a collaboration that could see new Hondas coming equipped with a PlayStation 5. The two companies established Sony Honda Mobility in September. The goal of the company is to combine music, movies, and gaming to take on its rival in Tesla. Izumi Kawanishi, president of SHM, indicated that entertainment in autonomous cars is the next frontier of technology, something that they note Tesla has yet to do. It will be interesting to see how the collaboration works out, but let's hope they can solve the issues around self-driving cars, which include 11 deaths in 4 months, before we start slaying joggers on the highway. And something to note here, Chris, I appreciate you for doing news. He puts in his own note here. Hilarious that we may live in a future where someone will be playing Gran Turismo 7 in their car instead of driving their car.
110%. Let me tell you, we had this conversation on the trophy room this week. It's very not safe for work, but you guys should really give it a shot, because we had a lot of fun with this segment. I'll just say, I'll say this. This is a scary future that we're heading into, right? I don't feel comfortable not driving a car, let alone playing my PlayStation 5 while I'm going 65 on the freeway.
Do you remember, I think it was Fast and the Furious 1, where Ja Rule had Gran Turismo on the PS2 on his radio?
Yeah, man. Like,
the remarks that he said, he was talking about how, and the guy who actually said these things is one of the people who was behind the Aibo AI dog, the robot, Sony's little Aibo dog, which are cool. I mean, they're very interesting things. So these are people who have a lot of trust in AI, and I think the average person still has a reasonable distrust of the full extent of AI, and I think reasonably so, as Chris marks in the notes here.
My Alexa turns on when we're having a conversation still. You know, we're not talking
Yeah.
about you, Alexa. And no, I don't want an extra pillow. Don't order it from Amazon. What are you doing? You know? So yeah, no,
Yeah.
I have
So
no faith.
in that end, he's talking about how the next frontier of autonomous driving essentially is that you can use that time to catch up on other things. And I like the idea of not making it immediately business focused, because I think there's something just inherently shitty about a company being like, we're going to make it to where the car can drive itself so that you can do more work. I like that they're like, we're going to make it to where the car can drive itself so you can listen to the music that you want to listen to, catch up on the movies you've been missing, play that God of War boss fight you've been waiting to get back to. I like the spirit of it, but boy, do I not trust it.
No, yeah, I love the, oh God, what's the one Tom Cruise movie? Oh my God, what is it? Something, what is it, Protocol?
Ghost Protocol.
Is it Ghost Protocol? Where they're
Mission
seeing
Impossible.
in the future? No, where they're seeing in like the crimes that have already happened. Remember that?
Oh, I'm not sure if I know what movie you're talking
my God.
about.
I'm gonna IMDb
It's Tom Cruise?
It's a Tom Cruise movie. He's got special gloves. He's waving at the monitor. And they're like, oh, look at this crime. And then it's like told in the future that he's going to commit a crime. Anyway, there's a part where he's driving to work. Minority Report, thank you. There's like part where he's like driving to work, but he's in like a pod. And I'm like, I think they think that we're about to live in this reality when, again, like my Siri goes, oh, no, relax. It still activates when I say things like don't talk to me like that, Siri. Know your role. You're a phone. I'm a man. Know your place, phone. But like to me, it's like you're talking about 10 plus years in the future. Like this tech's not here. Let alone putting a PlayStation 5 in it. It's a cute idea, but it's fantasy. To me, I'm more curious of how car companies, to me, as an outsider looking in, you get to tell me if I'm full of crap or not. And maybe it's just because I don't like Elon Musk bias, but like a lot of car companies seemingly are getting closer and closer to Tesla in terms of electronic cars or electric cars and what they're capable of. That I'm more interested of like, how far can this Sony Honda electric car go until I have to plug it in and charge it? That's my biggest concern, because still, from again, outsider looking in, no one's been able to touch Tesla in that regard, but we're starting to come close.
Yeah. And that's a real question, because when you're talking about high-end electronics on something that's already battery driven, playing your PlayStation 5 is just going to draw a lot of that power.
Absolutely.
And only exacerbate the problem of getting to where you need to go. And then the question becomes, well, if I'm only using it to drive around town, what is really the benefit? Okay, let me say this from someone who lives in a town where I can get to where I work from my house in 10 minutes. I understand that I come from a very different situation depending on where you live. So for me personally, when I look at this, I think to myself, this would give me no benefit at all. I wouldn't even try and play 10 minutes of a game on the way to work, because I don't like doing that. Like, I like to sit down with something when I know I'm going to play for like at least 30 minutes to an hour and hopefully more. So to that end, it's like, if you're not going to talk about using it for long-term commutes, which would rely on how far you can go, it starts to look less and less like something of value and more of like a, hey, here's a gimmick of we put a PlayStation 5 in a car. They're hard to get, but here they are dedicated in this car, if that's still the case.
Yeah.
What an interesting idea for this actually, though, is kind of heading back towards the idea of something more like Uber and stuff, where if these ride sharing things to where people can buy these cars and be like, hey, passengers, as we go, 45 minutes from the airport to your hotel, as we go from the 45-minute drive from your airport to your hotel or your Airbnb or whatever it be, here you go, play some games.
Yeah.
Watch a movie. I think that aspect is interesting because entertainment in cars doesn't have to mean for the driver. It can mean for everyone else. But then you have to fight with, I don't know if you've ever seen this, a lot of cars have safety regulations to where even if other people in the car could be doing this thing, the car will not let certain things happen when you're in certain things. So if you're in reverse, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
You can't change things. So you can't connect a new phone to Bluetooth without the car being parked in a lot of cars. So when you think about
my
those
Toyota,
aspects,
it's just like that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like why can't it be that the person in the seat next to me who's not driving can connect a new phone? And I get that they do it so that there's no chance for you to abuse it, but regulation I feel like is going to get very much in the way of this, and if not, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, very much so. And honestly, maybe it should, because again, this type of future creeps me out. But I'm way more interested to see how these automakers catch up to Tesla if they're able to, and what they're actually able to do. Because as we've seen Tesla stock slowly start to drop more and more, and the future of that company may possibly being in limbo, as Elon plays 4D chess with being an edgelord on Twitter. That Tesla stock is tied into the deal with Twitter. So if Twitter does not work out for Elon, that spells really bad news for Tesla. And that means companies like Honda, like Toyota, like Chevy, and all these can kind of move into this field and really and really put a dent in that market. So I'm very interested in the electric car scene, but not in the let's put a PlayStation in my car scene.
The interesting, a little tidbit that's not necessarily gaming related, but electronic cars are actually facing an issue that is very similar to what was having to go on for its namesake in particular. I don't know how much you know about Edison and Tesla.
Yeah.
But when you think back to the original, for anyone who does know, the alternating current and direct current argument, where they were trying to figure out who is going to be the power grid of America and the upsides and downsides to each. And the problem with AC is that no one had figured out an AC generator, and that's where Tesla came in and patented the first AC generator that was commercially viable, and that's how they were able to spread that network. But the way AC power works is that it scales up to travel at very high voltage, and then a transformer takes it in and then reduces it down to a voltage that your house can use. It's interesting that right now Tesla is at the point where it's dealing with the problem that DC power had, which was Edison's thing, where it's like, how do you more economically deal with getting power to last as far out as you need to? Because DC current, you had to have a power plant pretty much within every mile of wherever you were going to be using it at. So I just find that there's some odd dramatic irony that Tesla is facing a problem that its namesake solved in a sense. So electric cars are very interesting, and I'm curious to see what can come of them. But a lot of that is all technology, not even just vehicles, are weighed down by battery tech having not moved enough. So it's a problem for why your phone can't last typically more than a day, and why your car can't typically drive more than a couple hundred miles on, a charge, if you're lucky. And that's if you paid for the double battery, the
double motor.
Battery. Yeah.
I know. I know a thing or two. I got smarts in my head from time to time.
Oh, we got a question here. Oh, never mind. I'm sorry. I skipped a little forward. We actually have news before that question. More news on the future of Call of Duty has come out, because we can't have a single moment of peace, as we talked about last week on your show. Microsoft has said that they've now offered Sony a deal that would keep Call of Duty on PlayStation for the next 10 years. This would mean that the next 5 mainline games in the series would remain on the console, assuming Jason Schreier's reporting on Call of Duty going to a cycle of release of every other year is indeed true. Sony has declined to comment on the figure, but it does jive with Spencer's comments we discussed last week, of course, in which he indicated that he would be open to committing to Call of Duty to get the deal past the goalie. This has been beaten to the ground by many ways, at least talking about the deal itself. So instead, we're going to loop a listener question, Mr. Sean One Neo, the man who first got all this ball rolling between R2 podcast. He says, as a PS, quote, fanboy, am I the only one who's excited for Microsoft acquiring Call of Duty? Because when Sony has something to fear, they go that extra mile to win us over, and as loyal fans, we reap all the benefits. And he's not wrong. I think the most I've ever loved Sony from a feeling like as a fan of Sony, I was just getting to eat, and was getting all the benefits was PS3. That mid to late PS3 era where they were like, we are going to claw back from this botched launch. Was some of the absolute ballsiest and crazy moves. You saw some of the highest highs and a few of the lowest lows of Sony. But Sony can be beautiful when put in a corner. They can. They've proved it many times.
And so I'm trying to tell folks there is something we don't know here and something that is at play here. And we have to be comfortable with the fact that there is unknowns, right? So that said, I think about the Bethesda Microsoft deal, and one of the reports coming from Google Stadia of the moment they knew they couldn't compete and that it was over is when they announced that they were buying Bethesda. They saw that and going, oh, we're not able to compete on such a level that Microsoft is wanting to compete at. We can't just seek funds from Alphabet the way that Microsoft has. Their Phil was not able to speak to their CEO and convince them in such a way. And so they backed out of gaming, right? And listen, I'm not saying that Call of Duty and the whole of Activision is the thing that, if had, it's going to hurt them in such a way that PlayStation's out of games. I'm not saying that, but I think it would dramatically hurt their shareholders, the people that aren't gamers, of what faith that they have to compete in the marketplace with Microsoft, this $1 trillion company, right? It's not us. We know when Sony's put in a corner, they'll make a game like Uncharted 2, right? Or an Infamous. Shareholders don't think like us. They're thinking about the dollars and cents, and they're very emotional people as well, as we've seen stocks drop over. Just again, like going back to the Elon thing, right? Like, oh no, he made a few bad tweets, and now you're seeing Tesla stock drop to the lowest it's been in years. So like they're an emotional, questionable bunch. But that being said, there is a feeling, and you have to have that sense of it in the Sony HQ, that this is important to them. And this deal may hurt them dramatically. So, will they get weird and do something different? Oh, absolutely. I bet like Battlefield is chomping at the bit to get that, that marketing right from Sony after Call of Duty is said and done, right? But I think there is this future that Sony looks at this and go, oh God, how? What do we do? Because we've lost now billions of dollars in revenue. Think about it. Call of Duty is the number one selling game every year on PlayStation. No matter if there's a God of War, Ragnarok, or a Spider-Man, it's consistently number one. The last decade, I think it's only been kicked out of the number one spot like once or twice. So it's an important IP. That being said, I am excited because if Sony takes this moment going, okay, first off, PlayStation means way too much. It's such a big part of our organization. We have to rethink how we approach games now. That's going to be exciting for us. Agreed. And you're already seeing them do that. I would argue you're already seeing them prepare for a future where Call of Duty is not on that platform. You take a look at all the games as service games that they have planned and announced and how varied they are. I think, PlayStation looks at the mistake that they tried when trying to combat Call of Duty on PS3. They're like, we're just going to put all types of shooters on here. We're going to give you a Resistance. We're going to give you, a Starhawk. We're going to give you a Killzone. We'll call them Call of Duty killers. And like none of those things panned out. So to see them go, okay, we're going to make a Tarkov-esque, Division-esque, Last of Us multiplayer game. That's dope. That's a market that that I feel like not enough people have tapped yet. There's opportunity there. Then
at least on console. Yeah.
At least on console. And then, they'll go over and going, hey, we're going to make a mobile games as service game. All right, sure. Cool. You got the rumors of a Horizon MMO. Like they're working on so many different things and so many varied things that are games as service that aren't just a shooter up, pew, pew, bang, bang. Because it's really simple to say, oh, you know what they could do? They could just give us a SOCOM We all miss SOCOM. I miss the PSP SOCOM so much. That's the easy answer. That's the easy out. But I think the more complex thing is, hey, there are markets here that we don't have to just go toe to toe with Call of Duty or Apex. We can go somewhere else and make buku bucks. So I think they're preparing for that already, and how successful they are at it is going to be the thing that's telling. But I'll say this, as I've been echoing, the fact that Microsoft in the beginning gave them a 3-year extension, then said, hey, let's give us a competition, and now we just walked up to Sony and said, hey, remember a month ago when our CEO kind of called you out? Sorry about that. Here's a 10-year deal. That's telling to me that this is not going the way we, even in the gaming sphere, thought it should be going.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It's and no matter what you think, if it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I think Microsoft for the first time is concerned that there is an actual chance this doesn't go through. And I'm actually more concerned if it doesn't go through than if it does, for both Activision and the Xbox division. Because people are like, oh, well, Xbox, well, what are they going to do? They're going to throw all the money at all these types of advertising and marketing deals like Sony does. It's like, do they? Do they? Because this is a huge defeat. It shows that they can't just gobble up publishers or developers. Does that give Microsoft a rethink of the Xbox brand? So
does it make you rethink Game Pass?
Exactly.
How much is this important for Game Pass's plans to move forward? Yeah.
And I'll cut this TED Talk short when I say, what does this mean then for Activision? As we've seen, their toxic workplace kind of put a shine and a spotlight on there. And what does that mean for the people that work there? Not in just that regard, but their well-being in terms of their job security. Activision was already in a rough spot because COVID kind of knocked all the cogs out from positioning. So now Activision has to do something drastic, and that's scary. So to me, I see all of this as actually troubling for multiple reasons, and it's not because PlayStation might have to make a SOCOM game. So I think the deal should go through. I think Sony needs to get weird again, and that was my TED Talk. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll be at the bar if you need
me. So a couple things you said is, I really loved when Sony had their back against the wall and thinking we need a Halo killer, we need a Call of Duty killer. We got some of my favorite shooters of all time. I adore Killzone. I adore Resistance. I think they're really quirky and fun shooters that I don't think anyone would have ever made if they weren't trying to throw shit at the wall and see what stuck. Yep. And part of that is also, I don't know if you remember the oft-forgotten Haze, the Ubisoft Halo killer.
Yes.
But here's the thing. I at least appreciate the approach behind it, because I remember looking at Haze and thinking it's an interesting concept that they just swung and missed hugely on.
Yeah.
I think that the idea, though, the fact that anyone was willing to be like, look, we're going to make it to where these dudes have helmets on, they shoot nectar, and the nectar stuff just gives them superhuman abilities. I think that is a cool idea, but it's not an idea I think would have ever originally left the pitch floor if it hadn't been for, we have to come up with some way to counteract Halo at the time, and then at what eventually became Call of Duty. But I think the last thing I'll note on what you said, because I think it sums it up pretty well, is I do think Sony needs to get weird again. I love that. And I think that, much like you said, both Sony's response to this, or continued insistence that this not go through, and then, of course, Microsoft's continually shifting response to Sony and how that they're approaching this, shows how important this deal is, not only to Sony, how important it is that Sony view it to not go through, but also how important Microsoft view it, that it needs to go through.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if either of us know what the actual reasons for either of those things are.
I don't think, and I'm going to say this as bluntly as I can, I don't think anyone knows. And if anybody tells you, oh, here's the I give it a 70-30 split or a 60-40, whatever, nobody knows at this point, because they are facing world governments that want to curb big tech and its influence to to heavy degrees. So, to me, I feel like we as an audience also have to have, I've been saying rethink a lot, but it's true, a rethink of, or kind of look at it through a different angle of like, okay, so why isn't it going the way we think it should be? What is the true cause and concern, rather than poke at like one dude's Twitter, post of like, my PlayStation, so like that silly stuff. I think we could, if there is someone able to dive deeper into the complexities of these deals, I think we're gonna get a better and clearer view, a non-biased look at it. I think is going to be the best. But I don't think anyone in the gaming industry is truly qualified to be the authority here.
So let me ask you this, because this is something that Chris and I disagree on, and I'm just more curious to gauge you. In your mind, of course, this is with what we feel like we know, and of course, our own versions of what our versions of big business acumen may be. You outside looking in, as is, do you think if the deal goes through, that means M&A stuff that's happening throughout the entire industry is going to be even less hands-on? Or do you think that if the deal goes through, then it's like from here on out, we have this tightened and very little, much more is going to go through? Definitely not anywhere near this level.
Like in Microsoft's purview?
Well, in anywhere. Like, I mean, Microsoft clearly, because they'll be big, but I think even if this goes through, I think what I'm asking is, do you think the extra eyes that have happened as a result of this and how much time and effort going through is going to cause an M&A stop, or at least slow in gaming? Or do you think that if it goes through, gaming is going to have a wide open M&A spree?
I think it's red light, green light, and currently we're at a yellow light and we're waiting for it to turn. Like, but this yellow light has different ideas. It could go green or red. I think if this doesn't go through, I think, I think companies the size of like a Tencent or Microsoft or Apple or whoever wants to get into the gaming sphere that is a giant has to rethink what they want to do and how they do it. I think if Microsoft doesn't land this, you're right. I think then Game Pass has to change somehow, or their approach to buying developers and publishers needs to change. I think if this goes through, you're going to see more. You're going to see way more mergers and acquisitions go through, because I think this is the toughest hurdle. This is $69 billion, and if this goes through, then why not a company come in and walk in and purchase 2K? Why can't someone just walk in, knock on Ubisoft's door, and give them a golden parachute? Why can't someone knock on the door right now to Square Enix? I think a lot of these mergers and acquisitions right now, a lot of companies want to make them, but they're looking at this one currently, and this is the barometer of, okay, can we do this or not? Let's have the biggest company in the world be that canary in the coal mine for us.
Yeah, I think you're falling more on Chris's side. My personal view, and something that was said from Microsoft here, is that I think that it depends on what the M&A is going toward. Microsoft is talking about how this acquisition is not to further themselves in the gaming normal console, I guess more traditional gaming market. They're more looking at the broad phone casual market, which all of the games industry is run by the casual market. None of us hardcore gamers want to really look at it that way. Yep. But the reality is games are made or broken on whether or not they can do well with casual people. God of War didn't sell to 20 million hardcore gamers. It sold to like 4 million, maybe, hardcore gamers, and then 16 million gamers who were more casual, who got the marketing or word of mouth worked for them.
I think you're seeing it. I think you're right here as well. Like this acquisition, if I'm Microsoft, it is more of the mobile market than anything. I think it's also mobile and PC. They're seeing I think when they're talking about how Game Pass is growing significantly so on PC and it's slowed on console, I think they're taking a look at Blizzard games going, you're going to propel us. Oh, you're going to propel. Call of Duty is going to propel, PC Game Pass, even console Game Pass to a large extent as well. But they also take a look at King going, oh, we like a good Candy Crush. And if we can work, benefits into Game Pass here as well, we will. And I think you're seeing them. This is how $1 trillion company looks at how to build a mobile platform. It's like, we just buy it. And you're seeing Sony go, okay, we can make way smaller purchases, but we need to kind of build it from the ground up, build the foundation. That's why you see them go out there and purchase Apple App Store execs to build this for them, because they don't have the cash flow that Microsoft can go out and buy it. So yeah, I think there's also pros and cons of both of those things.
So in looking at that, I guess really where I was going from is that Microsoft at least has the ability to say, well, we're not doing that to get in this market. And I think that the difference is who, you ask and looking at, if this goes through, then what would stop another company from coming in and saying, hey, we're going to buy 2K. And I think if you look at it, if Sony were to buy 2K, that's almost unquestionably to build their presence in their existing market and further draw competition out. Whereas Microsoft is fighting tooth and nail to say, we're not making these purchases to constrain the console market, where we can basically say we've already lost. We're going to still compete within there, but we're not worried about ever beating Sony. We're worried about continuing to grow our market to where it stays there, but then we continue to grow towards PC and mobile. And when you look at those things, that's my real question, because I do fall on the fact that I think if this goes through, I don't mean that no M&A will continue to happen, but I think that each one will be looked at far closer than they have been up to this point, because they're going to start being like, what is your goal? What is the potential risk of damage or benefits to the market in which you stand to gain or lose the least by making this acquisition? And maybe I'm wrong.
Sure.
I think I tend to look back on, I don't know if you know how many times that T-Mobile tried to buy Sprint multiple times. It took multiple times for someone to finally go, like, Sprint has lost enough business. They're not a big enough player in the game. And AT&T and Verizon are still so large that even if we let this happen, it's really only a benefit to the phone market.
And that's the thing. It's like, there is a good chance this thing gets blocked. A very good chance. It happened to Disney. It can happen here as well. But that doesn't mean the deal's over. It means, okay, we need to rework and give some caveats to certain things. So maybe,
sure.
Like, real talk, it's not even out of the possibility anymore. Like, maybe, PlayStation, you get to keep Call of Duty forever. Blizzard games, they gotta run on Linux. I don't know what the ridiculous caveats will be, but there's gonna be, I think at the end of the day, this deal goes through, but there's going to be caveats that things have to be run a certain way in order for this to go through. Because I think the companies that's going to need these mergers and acquisitions the most at the end of the day is not going to be Microsoft. I think at the end of the day, PlayStation's going to need to start making some deals to start securing partners to make sure that they don't go anywhere, because right now we're seeing all these titans making moves in the European market, and we're seeing PlayStation make these strategic partnerships to help maintain that FromSoftware isn't going anywhere, right? We talk about how all roads lead to Square Enix on our show, and that road is probably multiple roads. Right? Yeah. Like multiple close partnerships and infusion of cash between like Nintendo, Tencent, and Sony. You could see a weird possibility where like Sony's walking around with investor money going, hey, we'll invest in you. Just please don't ever leave us.
I think you're right, because I noticed that Sony tends to want to partner with people that they don't have to worry about being direct competition, because they're working alongside Tencent with FromSoft, with Kodakawa for FromSoft, and looking and saying like, hey, we want to invest because maybe we can't outright buy you, But we can invest enough money to, and then co-invest with another company who doesn't have a console. Their interest is in third-party gaming, or at least, they don't have a machine interest involved. So they can go, Tencent won't care. If we put an exclusive FromSoft game because we've helped invest into this, or we start making FromSoft animated movies or whatever it is that they plan on doing, then they could say Tencent still gets what they wanted out of the deal. We get what we wanted out of the deal. And we don't really have to worry about that leaving and going somewhere exclusively.
Absolutely.
Instead, this is a company that doesn't have exclusivity on the mind because they don't have a console they're pushing behind this. Whereas no matter what Xbox says, there will always be that reality of, and same is true of Sony, will always be a reality of at any point in time, they could pull the rug and go, you are our company. We will tell you where you release.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as much as they talk about Bungie, I still view a world where if things get desperate enough, I bet, not that it would go down well, but I bet Sony could tell Bungie, like, hey, we bought you and we bought you with that in mind. But things have changed. Though I wonder how the contractual language is
no, I think so. The way that I understand it is Bungie has incredible freedom. So I actually don't see that ever being like, we own you. You get no. I
hope just that's never the case. But I think that the possibility always exists because ultimately they are owned.
I whacked the crap out of my mic. But yeah, no, I think the possibility I say is very slim. But I would say that Sony is probably looking at how we protect it, like, because all of a sudden Bethesda's gone. Right? Mm-hmm. There's a possibility of Call of Duty being gone. Now you've lost Western partners. So now you need to make sure and either grow them or help fund them. So I think XDev, at the end of the day, when everything's said and done, is going to be a massive arm for Sony. Massive. And whatever
and
deals happen.
It always really has been to some degree. Sony's had a very active XDev thing, but in the past they've been willing to let certain things go when they felt like it wasn't rolling. It's how we lost Rime as an exclusive, and What Remains of Edith Finch was also at one point in time an XDev game. Both of those ended up losing their PlayStation exclusivity. Still came out to be beloved games in their own rights. But I think Sony may be a little more coy about that moving forward. It's like, at some point, if we can just maintain the relationship, let's just keep going with it. I wonder if the Rime and What Remains of Edith Finch situation would have happened under current day Sony, and maybe it would have. But I at least think it would have taken more work for them to hit that point.
I'm very curious where PlayStation's move. I think we have a story about the Asian markets. But I'm very curious if the XDev's moves in places like China, South Korea, and Japan are going to look like. And I'm very interested of what PlayStation wheels and deals in Europe, specifically in Eastern markets. That's Eastern European markets. I think that's going to be, that's where like the future of games gets really exciting for me. Cause those are the next moves. And we're seeing them begin to dip into their toes into those uncharted waters, as it were.
Next thing up on the news, after two.
Can I say the Brett real talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
Congratulations. This was my favorite talk about Activision Blizzard stuff in 4 months.
Yeah. That's been a rough conversation topic point. So
trophy unlocked for you, brother.
All right, guys, moving on. After two disappointing releases from Volition, the studio and its talent will be rolled into Gearbox. Agents of Mayhem and the reboots of Saints Row both disappointed critically, though it appears that despite this, the new Saints Row was at the top of the NPD in August. So sounds like while it may not have been a critical darling, it at least justified well enough commercially. But either way, Volition employees are still working on patches for the game, Saints Row, including one that rolled out in conjunction with this news that fixed over 200 bugs. It is unclear how this will affect the future of Volition's franchises, but it sounds like for the most part, Volition as we know it, and maybe even by namesake, will be gone, and they will instead just be part of Gearbox. It's unfortunate because losing any team is rough, but from my personal viewpoint of this, it's been a long time since Volition's done anything that's truly spoke to me. I thought Saints Row, something about it looked off from the moment they showed it. And the more they showed it, the less confident I felt like I was in the game. And then when it came out, I felt a little like vilified, or you know what I mean? But okay, I felt vindicated. That's what I meant. Where you're looking and you're saying, it sucks that I felt that way, but it sucks even more that my gut seems to have been proven right.
Yes. Yeah. You share my thoughts 110% because I loved Saints Row 1. I adore Saints Row 2. I felt like they got a little bit too crazy with Saints Row 3, and ever since I wanted them to go back to basics, get have the balance of crazy, in check. And it just sucks that this wasn't it. It really does. I still would love to go back to it and try it out for myself. But yeah, this is Embracer. Again, we're talking about big acquisitions of things and things going right, things going wrong. This is one of the times where things go wrong and they have to reshuffle. Now, the one positive note is like now that it's back with Gearbox, that could mean like Gearbox could put them back on track. They got to earn their quarter probably again, but Volition's talented. It sucks that they're going to be like Gearbox Support Studio A, but at least they're with an organization that understands the basics of what makes a good looter and a shooter experience. So
true. It hurts, they have a very big thing with that.
But maybe one day they could come back.
We are circling in this something that is an unfortunate reality of any industry and any company that exists long enough. I don't know that I can say that I fully agree with you that Volition is talented in their current form.
Yeah,
I think because I think
it's me being hopeful.
Because you remember a version of Volition that spoke to you, and that was that. And I understand that that's like there's a really strong pull to look at things in the best way that you remember them. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I don't feel like they've shown any of the promise of games that drawn me to them, even ones that had jank. Red Faction Guerrilla is a really crazy game.
Yeah. And
it's so unique and fun. They did a remastered. Sadly, I did not get around to it yet, but I played Guerrilla a ton on PS3. It was really, it tried to push outside, be like, what if we really made destructible environments something in the game? And they did a great job during the PS3. I feel like Volition was fantastic during the late PS2 into the PS3 era, but it seems like this last gen, they've just not struck there. But as much as Volition may be the same in name, they are not the same in employ. They are not the same developers that made Saints Row 1 or 2. Saints Row 3 probably didn't happen with the same group of people that wanted Saints Row 1 and 2, or at least Saints Row 4 didn't happen with them in mind. And that's not a bad thing. But, I talk about every developer eventually faces a reckoning of falling out with at least one person who always loved them up until they didn't. And they go, wow, it's weird because I always felt like I love Sony Santa Monica. I love Naughty Dog. I love Bethesda Game Studios. Until one day you look and you go, I thought I loved them, but I've not loved a game from them in 10 years.
I think a good example is BioWare right now. Right?
Oh, yeah, dude.
God bless Anthem, by the way. But
it
flew too close to the sun. It flew too close to the sun.
I got the platinum in Anthem. I was one of those weird people that loved Anthem for what it was and the potential it had.
Sure.
It is a flawed game that should have done a lot more. But I agree, and I think that they know, because I've been saying that the way that they so quickly reverted back to Dragon Age and Mass Effect, even when the last Mass Effect game was a huge disappointment for many people, it goes to show that they are at a point where they're scared, and the only way they see forward is to play it safe with beloved IP that they are. I would be surprised to see them approach a new IP anytime soon, because at this point they don't want to get the EA axe that EA's done to many studios it's purchased.
Absolutely.
And that's unfortunate. But there was a point in time where I loved BioWare, and I can't say I love BioWare as a developer right now, even though I loved Anthem for some crazy reason, you know?
And it's funny that like when we talk about like PlayStation Studios, right? I think PlayStation has done a great job of solidifying its culture in their studios. We talk about Naughty Dog and its shift from Jack to Uncharted to Last of Us into whatever the future project is. They've evolved and matured into such a beloved studio. And even as their figureheads leave, it seems like the culture provides other figureheads to come in and make those names that name for themselves. Santa Monica, I was joking with Kyle on our Patreon show, The Road to Greatness, when talking about in our spoiler cast God of War, and I'm like, joking, I'm like, when are we going to admit Santa Monica probably the most talented studio Sony's got, right? Like this is something else. But even them, they've had their trials, their high times, the turbulent times with Ascension, and then coming back into grace with God of War 2018. So everything ebbs and flows, but it's how you retain, I think, the culture of studios is so important for the success of those studios.
Yeah, no, agreed. So this is unfortunate, but I agree with you that even if we don't go get Volition in name, maybe somewhere in that there's still a core team that can work together. And I think the bigger question here is that I don't think that the new Volition needed to make Saints Row. And as someone who's not a huge Saints Row fan, I'll say this. I agree with a lot of the people that say, if you don't have a love for a series and you want to come in and rewrite that series, you're seldom going to speak to the people that the game needs to speak to. And at some point, if Saints Row was going to be so different, what was the value of calling it Saints Row? At what point does it make more sense to go, this is Volition, this is the team that made Saints Row, but this is a new IP where you don't carry the expectations of what a Saints Row game should be. Instead, you look at this game for what it is. And then I think you would have also gotten a slightly more critically unbiased opinion of to what that game was. I still think in looking at everything I've seen about the game that I wouldn't have liked it, but I don't think it helped. And so I really think sometimes, Neil Druckmann was actually around whenever Naughty Dog was doing the Jack games. And even though he kind of, when he talks about Jack, you can tell that in his mind, he's like, that wasn't my baby. I don't really feel the love to go back to that because I don't have an idea for that. Even if he loves it, right? They could probably still make a great Jack game, but I think he knows that deep down, he's not the person with that vision, and he doesn't want to be saddled with that responsibility when there might be someone who comes in and can handle that and has that love, and he can see it and go, yes, you have a vision, you have something we can really work with. And
it's why I think what makes PlayStation I echo this all the time. I think PlayStation gives their studios at least the illusion of the freedom to let things go, the freedom to restart things, the freedom to make the games that's going to, that is their baby, right? So like you could say taking a risk on The Last of Us was like, this is what Naughty Dog wanted to do. It's something weird and unique. They could have kept on making Uncharted games. In fact, they did. But like they took a risk here and they stuck the landing. Corey wanted to remake God of War's image, he's a dad now. I know many of my players are probably dads now. They could maybe resonate with this character now more than ever. And you're seeing that happen, right? So, even down to like, how could you have guessed that, a Sucker Punch would come in and go, we're going to make an authentic samurai Kurosawa love letter because this is what we really want to do.
Yeah.
And then like they get like ambassadorships to the island. That's how good they did of a job.
Yeah. And
freedom,
for all the hate that it got, sorry to cut you off, but for all the mixed reception that it got, I should balance. The fact that Days Gone was made from a studio like Bend, who was not known for original IP. At that point, they had been known as a studio to work with existing IP and really, for the most part, just transfer that
PSP,
handheld.
Studio. And even like for all the faults of Days Gone. And then to see them go, okay, you guys get another crack at it. Like that's crazy. And you're right. Like, dude, they already had a zombie game. And then like there were people that championed that and saw the vision through. That's that's cool. You don't see that really anywhere else. So,
I do wonder, you say that we don't see that anywhere else, but I have been perpetually curious if Pentiment started development prior to the purchase on Oblivion's side, if that started development and was already an idea and in some form of work before Microsoft's purchase or after. Because I'll say Pentiment is a bold move. The fact that they would fund that game, it's a cheap game. And there's a question that the answer
go for it.
I want to give is kind of like that. It's not right here. I'm going to wait a little bit. Although it is a good, you know what? Screw it. We'll pull it in here because it's a good question for the thing. So while we're talking about all these old IPs, one of the persons who came in on Twitter said it's at Yoki BTS. They said, do you think PlayStation will ever revive classic old IP games? And while this is not an old classic IP game, something I've been really championing myself, and me and Chris have talked a lot about my particular view, is that I really want Sony to look within who they can work with and give existing IP or new, very small IP to teams and be like, just make something that's small budget that seems like we would never make, but we're just going to do it. Because Pentiment is a game that I would not have expected to have been made. It's not a game I would have expected Microsoft to have greenlit. We can't say right now whether that is because they're in that weird transitional period where it may have just been something far enough along that Microsoft said finish it. But it is kind of amazing to see Microsoft put out a game like Pentiment as an Xbox Game Studios published game. And Sony does that sometimes. Concrete Genie was a huge surprise. And it's that type of love and odd game. And my personal view of that, right, is I do think PlayStation will bring more classic old IP back. I think that there was a higher chance of that happening more frequently when Sean Layden was involved, just because he had that kind of personality and he really championed that. I loved him coming out on stage with the shirt for Crash Bandicoot, and then of course that happening. Then later him coming out on stage with the Medieval shirt, and then letting Medieval happen. So I think it was a little more, but I still think there's a really great path forward for Sony to be like, look at some of these legacy IP that are very gameplay focused, and let's just have fun and say, we have God of War Ragnarok to tell our story heavy games. What does it hurt if we make a Twisted Metal game for $2 million at Lucid Games or Fire Sprite, wherever that rumored game is, and be like, let's just let that be. And you know what? As long as the game makes $2 million, money well spent, because it helps build this image of PlayStation as a mainstay in gaming. We're a pillar of gaming history, and this is us celebrating that history.
That yeah,
and it can do well, as we've seen Nintendo do with many of their legacy IP. So I don't know how successful Kirby is, but they keep making those damn things.
They should stop. Kirby's an abomination. So I'll say it again. Kirby shouldn't exist. So okay, I'll say this. Yes, and you'll probably see it soon. I think they're definitely going to go to the treasure trove. I think that's one of the exact reasons why you buy Blue Point. So, yes.
Though, interesting that you buy Blue Point, and then right now, as far as we know, Blue Point's working on an original IP.
Yeah, they say a lot of things.
They do.
And they said we're going to make original content. It's like, what does that mean, Blue Point? What does that mean? Just tell us you're making Metal Gear. Just get it off your chest. Tell us you're making Legend of Jagroon. We know these things are happening because we said it with confidence. We said it with gusto, so it needs to happen.
Doing this would be really interesting, but Chris has had this long-running joke kind of running with our my best friend, one of my best friends in life, Saul, one of our original co-hosts. He was who I started the podcast with, and he was adamant that they would never make a Bloodborne sequel without From. And I slightly agree with Chris on the fact that if Sony were ever going to look at a developer and say, who can make a Bloodborne sequel with it not having to weigh down From, we could still get Miyazaki to come in and basically do exactly what George R.R. Martin did with Elden Ring, where he creates the lore, but then lets the game be made from someone else. I think that there's a good argument that Blue Point's work on Demon Souls was so good, and they understand how to break a game down and be like, this is what makes this game feel this way, that if there was ever going to be a Bloodborne 2 not from FromSoft, I could see that being a Blue Point thing. Like, we proved ourselves with Demon Souls Remake, and now we're going to dig into what people love about Bloodborne. and we're going to bring that to a new title with Miyazaki helping write the lore and everything, and then we're going to work hand in hand with him.
Us Bloodborne fans, we're a really neurotic bunch. But I'm going to get 2 trophy room bits out of the way right here, right now. It has been, on the day of recording, 2,800 days since the launch of Bloodborne. We demand anything, a PC port, a remake, a remaster. I don't care. Just a JPEG? I'll take it. But we're also, if there is, and I think there's this growing idea, if there is anyone out there that could tackle IP, that understand an IP so intimately that they've never made, but they make from the ground up like it was their own, it is Bluepoint.
I agree.
I think most of their remakes, remasters show that. Shadow and Colossus remake is stellar.
It's so good.
Demon Souls remake is a remake even down to its faults.
Yes.
It's stellar.
Bold. I love that they do that. That's the kind of moves that you have to have. And Bluepoint is in a cheap part of the country. They're in Texas.
That's right.
They're very easy. They're a studio that you can employ and run people there, and the cost of living is easy to keep these cost of games down. And they're a smart, tech-savvy studio that knows how to do a lot with little. I think that they are really an ace in the hole for Sony. And I think Sony's known that forever, and that's why they have so closely worked with them to never truly let anyone else get a chance to get in there. Yeah. Sony has almost consistently kept them on the lockdown. The only game I can even actually think of that they did a remaster of that wasn't a Sony published game was the Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
Yep. Metal Gear Solid Collection.
And honest to God here, the way they start is you need to give us faith. So Demon Souls is a stellar remake, and I think it gives us a lot of faith that they could tackle a Bloodborne sequel. But we know that PlayStation loves, director's cuts. They love the definitive versions, whatever part ones, whatever. They love a good remake. They love an extra buck. And we're at easy lay where, again, trophy room bit here, you say it with confidence, you say it with gusto, and it shall happen. You're going to get a Bloodborne remake before you get anything else. So it's going to show people, Bluepoint knows what's up and they know how to make Bloodborne. So now that you have the foundation, they have the tools that have made Bloodborne numero uno or remade it. Now you can start making Bloodborne 2. And you're right. I think you bring on Miyazaki as the George Railroad Martin of, hey, give us some here's an afternoon, sit down with us and talk to us. Because I think Miyazaki, I think there was an interview with him that said something along the lines of like, oh, wow, when they said they wanted to make Demon Souls, we're like, wow, that's a feat. Good luck. And when they saw it, they were impressed by it. And Miyazaki was just like, visually, it showed that Elden Ring had to do something special. So So I think
good on them. They mostly succeeded there. I still think Demon Souls is the artistic. Okay, let me take it back.
Try carefully.
I haven't played enough Elden Ring to speak with that much authority. So let me take a step back. The 5 to 6, whatever it was, hours that I played of Elden Ring, I think the amount of detail visually and the artistry within that detail still slightly surpasses Elden Ring, though I think Elden Ring took a large step up from Dark Souls 3. And Dark Souls 3 was already a very pretty game, but when you have hardly any competition in your sector, it's easy to get away. And I think Demon Souls Remake was like, oh, that's like our game, but someone else did it. So we've got to at least try and match that. And I do think Elden Ring is quite a good looking game.
Elden Ring is a game where they're just like, hey, let's take Tolkien-inspired things and let's just make them creepy. Let's make it dark.
Let's take high fantasy and make it dark fantasy.
Yeah. And let's get shades of Scarlet in there. That's going to be great. And
yeah, I know there's some interesting moments, sadly, that have been ruined for me to some degree in Elden Ring, definitely from an artistic standpoint. That's why I actually stopped myself, because I thought of the few things that I had seen that were artistically, they're beautiful. I mean, it doesn't matter how detailed or not they may be. They're very interesting moments. But okay, moving on. Sony has committed to pumping more money into its China Hero Project initiative. The company announced that they will be adding about 1 million yuan, or about $140,000. But wait, there's more. Sony will now be fully publishing RPG Lost Soul Aside globally. Originally, they were still going to be publishing it, but not globally, which has also been delayed to early 2024. A devastating blow to my 2023 Metacritic draft. It was one of my last minute picks, because I had hoped that game would come out and really rock things off, but I'm a little disappointed in that. Lost Soul Aside, I've been following since the initial YouTube reveal from the Soul developer, and it's a little disappointing that 6 years on, we're still talking about it being 2 years away.
So for me, I think this is really cool. You're seeing them dive into different areas, cultures, and saying, let's make something together. You know, I think, oh my gosh, what's the South Korean action game that looks like, Bayonetta-esque, with the pretty lady that arms turned into like giant guns.
Yeah. Are you talking about giant guns? Are you talking about Project Eve?
Yeah, Project Eve, but
what is it called now? Stellar Blade?
Exactly. Stellar Blade, thank you. You're seeing that with Stellar Blade.
I hate that name. Project Eve is way cooler.
Project Eve is so much cooler. Real talk.
It's way cooler. It has a mystery to it, and Stellar Blade does not.
Yeah. So like, to me, it's just like, this is cool that they're going in different areas and saying, hey, work with us here. You're seeing that with like Microsoft as well, invest in these companies. So more investment to me in different areas means different ideas, means different takes. And it's only good for us. So I'm excited, not because I know much about this game, but really because the promise that, this can add to the culture that is gaming.
Yeah, for sure. Have you played anything that's come out of the existing China Hero project?
Yes, I played. Oh my god, it was the bunny with the big old mechanical
Forged in Shadow Torch. I love that game. That game was challenging. It was really fun. I thought the story was interesting. Yeah, that game was great.
I loved it. So I've played that thus far, but like, I'm really interested in like the Sun Wukong game that seemingly Microsoft may have the publishing rights to. Like, that's cool. Again, different ideas from different places. We don't always have to just go to Eastern Europe to get different ideas. We could go to India, we could go to China, we could go to South Korea, all these different places.
Well, and I like that, because like we typically see Eastern things as Western audience ourselves. We typically see Eastern things come out of Japan. So it's really great to look at some of the Eastern culture that's not specifically made with a Japanese lens in mind. So seeing some of these things come from like a Korean or a Chinese background, and the culture that comes within that, and then how they view and create stories within that in mind. I was actually really surprised that China Hero Project brought Fist, and in many ways, I think Fist is an allegory for the Chinese government.
It is. Very much. It definitely feels that way. I'm a little
surprised that title was able to come out of China, which is kind of cool. I don't know if it's just because it's just vague enough that it's more that us as Westerners are looking into it and going, well, that looks a lot like talking
maybe
bad
they
about
mess around
dictators.
With localization, or like maybe the sell is just like, it's America ?
Yeah,
but like,
yeah, maybe
very like, and they're like, are you sure? Because it sounds like us, and he's like, no, definitely them. But like, it's There's I was very surprised of the narrative out of that game for sure.
Yeah. Cool, man. Let's see. Moving on. It appears that Sony is going to be clamping down on spam games being released on the PSN. If a report on dex.exe is to be believed, the publisher has sent out a notice to developers that the company will be fighting the influx of these types of games, which, to be honest, has very much paced up lately.
Yeah. Too much.
And the punishments could go so far as being completely blacklisted from the store. Now, I want to start with this one real quick because I want to see where you are. I know that everyone has their view on at what point something is approaching the idea of censorship. And I don't want to act like Sony does not have their own right to be like, this is our platform. We will control what games are on it. I certainly think that's true, and I certainly believe in their ability to do that. My personal view looking at Sony is that while I do not like these games, I bemoan the fact that My Name is Mayo is a game all the time. And while I would never play that game or get that platinum, I don't care if anyone else does. You know what I mean? Yeah. So my thing is like, at what point does it make more sense for Sony not to say that we are going to ban these games and not allow them versus saying, if you want to make this type of game and there's an audience that's hungry for this thing, fine. But we are not going to make it readily, easily accessible. Instead, we're going to give you we're going to give you different listing. We're going to, I said the word earlier and I can't even think of it now, but essentially we're going to hide you down. You're not going to get priority.
Yeah.
I mean, delist, I think it just takes it completely off the store, you know? I think for me, I think that the game should still be allowed on the store, but you shouldn't get priority. Like when you go to search things, it shouldn't come up whenever you type something in that's vaguely close. You should have to search the exact name of the game. Because to me, I feel like Sony will be in its best bet and its best position to say, we don't care what you play. We are not going to dictate what you can or cannot play, but we will dictate what we do or don't give extra attention to, what we highlight on the store, what we give priority search to. So when you search something, games that are not under this category are going to come up before you ever see anything that's in this category. Not to say that you can't play the game or find it, but we're not going to aid in its spread. And personally, for me, I think that's my best middle ground, because the question I really have is, what do they mean by spam games? And at what point does Sony say, this game that by most people, or at least the people who are really looking at its count, it should not be looked at as a spam game, and they go, well, now I can't play this game just because Sony decided to draw the line.
I think the issue you have here is that you don't have context to you don't have context or the definition of what makes a spam game.
It's very broad. Right? And then at what point can that change? Because they're writing the definition at this point, as they have the right to do.
So, it's a very interesting point. I feel like first off, we've seen way too many of these games. Way too many. It is an issue. On the trophy room, we do something called Prepare the Drop, where we talk about the latest and greatest, all things PlayStation dropping and PlayStation for blah, blah, blah. We talk about all the games, and you'd be surprised how many games is like Super Jump, Super Cat Jump Hot Dog. And it's exactly
Super Taco Jump.
Yeah, Super Taco Jump. Yeah. Super Baby Jump. Like, who knows? Like, it's all like ridiculous. You're just pressing one button over and over again. You get these weird like .io games that pollute the storefront where all you have to do is press X for 20 minutes and you got the platinum. It's such an intricate problem, because I do think it exists. And I think if you delist or you hide them, you're still doing you're still blocking that thing from seeing the marketplace. You're just, by pushing it in a corner, you're still saying that this thing's voice isn't as important as this thing. You might as well be delisting it. PlayStation has a right to do it because it is their storefront. I understand what people have when it comes to censorship in games. Like, I think there's a more reasonable argument with the whole Martha is Dead thing, where, there's a grotesque scene that is edited out in the PlayStation version. I feel like that's more, censorship than, hey, Super Jump, you're not in it. And it speaks to another broader issue that, there's been a lot of conversations, especially around more mainstream creators, of why you're hiding your trophies. And I would add,
I have seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would add, why do you care? Yeah. Like, to me, I think we have a problem in the PlayStation ecosystem where we're taking a look at platinum games and we're doing literal platinum trophies, not platinum games at the developer. We're taking a look at these platinum trophies and we're assigning worth to them, and our worth is different for everybody. So like for me, I feel like a platinum trophy should be achievable by most people, as long as you love that thing, you should be able to go in and platinum that thing, because that's how I view platinums. But some people are like, no, you need to earn it. Like Bloodborne platinum is difficult. Good.
It is. Yeah.
It is. Then platinum it. And I've platinumed that. I platinumed Sekiro. I've platinumed Elden Ring. Because I love those games.
Yeah.
Not because they're difficult. But some people just go, well, I have the platinum to Sekiro, and I have thoughts on you saying that the God of War Ragnarok trophy is too difficult to get. Because I platinumed Sekiro, and I'm here to tell you, too bad, so sad, difficulty trophies, right? So to me, I feel like we have to kind of reconfigure our brains to what a platinum trophy really means, or trophies in general, because we have this idea, and especially like as a PlayStation host, like people may think, oh, you only have 51 platinum trophies, you cover PlayStation. Ugh. And there's that weird idea to it. Or I sometimes think, I only have 51 platinum trophies, I should really get that number. I host a PlayStation show. It's like you get that weird self-doubt where Kyle he loves a good easy plat. He likes the dopamine of seeing the trophy hit on the screen. He has like over 200, God knows what, trophies. And I tell him, are they real or are they fake? And he hates that because like, some people will look at that going, no, that doesn't count. Well, why doesn't it? To me, I get easy plats, but it's just for platinums for a game that I really like, that I couldn't platinum, and that's my symbolic. I always say my symbolic platinum. So
it's a surrogate. It's a surrogate platinum.
It's a surrogate platinum. So it's like, for me, we have this weird fascination with trophies and their meaning, and their meaning is so different than others. I would say that this goes more in line, less of censorship, but more of what Sony's been listening to a lot of indie developers talking about how hard it is to get their games seen on this platinum. On this platform because of these things. And as someone who has been on the other side of the gaming industry, I can tell you that there's a lot of thoughts that we have on, or that indie developers have on marketplaces of all kinds, not just PlayStation, but PlayStation is one of the hardest platforms to work with. So I think
purely just because I had the Darth. The Darth actually. There's a deluge of games constantly hitting the platform. My only thing here is that I feel like the first way to do this is that it feels like Sony punishing developers for doing what Sony's been allowing them to do. Because I think the first line of defense for Sony here would have been simply to look and say, we don't think that game is deserving of a platinum, because we've heard stories in the past, many years ago, about games being like, we tried and we could not get Sony to allow us to have a platinum, but then My Name is Mayo has a platinum. It's like, how does that come across? So I think Sony's first line of defense should have just been to dissuade people from making it by saying, you can make the game, but we're not going to allow it to have a platinum. So your market, because of the value of a platinum, is going to plummet, and you can put your game on our platform, but it won't really perform well enough. And after one or two games do that and people go, crap, people don't want these games unless there's that dopamine hit of a platinum, then they stop making those games anyway. And you end up fixing the problem without ever having to retroactively go back and say, listen, we let too much of you go through. Now we got to start taking your games off of our platform. One is more proactive and one is more reactive. And it tends to work better to be proactive. And Sony, unfortunately, just did not do that. I hope moving forward, that's really their answer, is maybe take some of them, do a clean slate, and say, listen, we're taking these games off because they're doing more harm than good as far as we see fit. But moving forward, you won't be able to get a platinum if your game, if we do not see, we'll be the arbiters of what trophies you can and can't get because we approve the games or deny the games. So we will deny your trophy list if we see a platinum. And you can make your game and it can release in every way. And I think it would deal with the problem on its own.
I think something along those lines needs to happen, but it's more like that's probably there. They just haven't told us. Like that again. I think we're all working at it. We don't know the context yet. We don't know the definition yet, because there's probably something where they're just like, it can't just be one thing, like one action over and over again. It has to be not to say a certain amount of length, but there needs to be, X, Y, and Z in this game for it to have a platinum. And the game cannot be, we get to decide if a free game gets a platinum or not, because the one thing that annoys me is like games like Fortnite that I've thrown hundreds of hours into, thousands at this point. I don't have an achievement for it. And like, why not? Or, sorry, a trophy in it. God, I said achievement. Sorry, blasphemy. I'm sorry.
Boo this guy.
The 360 fan in me came out for a brief second. I would like to apologize to everyone. I'm sorry. I briefly thought about Gears of War and how amazing it is. That said, but like I've played so much Fortnite. I want that platinum trophy in it.
Sure.
Just one.
No, I understand that. That's actually how I've stumbled on a few platinums. I played thousands of hours of Terraria, and one day I just sat there and thought, why don't I have the platinum in this? And I knocked it out. I mean, like it was super fun to do. I didn't mind it. But yeah, it is funny how sometimes you can play something forever and be like, how do I not have something for
X,
this?
Y, or Z. Yeah.
But, that goes back to your thing of how much value do you personally put on trophies versus how much do we collectively put on trophies, and then how much value, therefore, gets sent to the developers and Sony to think of, well, damn, do we have to have platinums because people view it as a motivating tool for purchasing, which means that people will buy more games, so we'll make more of our percentage for our cut. It's a really weird cycle, and I love trophies. I've loved trophies for years. I got out of trophy hunting for years as well because there is aspects of it that are not great. They for as much as it helps you finish a game for about as much as you're ever going to finish it and really see everything that game has to offer, it's also going to keep you from something else you may have enjoyed and played just as much because you were fascinated with getting a little virtual trophy that ultimately doesn't matter. And I say that as someone who has like 130 platinums now or whatever it be. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but trophies they're a great tool to help people want to stick with the platform. They are a great thing for you to look at your achievements. And I think that trophies so far are doing a far better job than the very early days of PlayStation Stars. I'm not very impressed with that service yet. It's early and I'm willing to give it time, but there is something to be said about having a connection to a console or at least a brand that you've spent so much of your life and time to look back and go, man, my first platinum was Infamous on the PlayStation 3. That's crazy.
My first platinum, I think, was the Order 1886.
Oh, wow. Yeah, look at you go. Yeah.
Think about that. I used to not care. And for everybody, just to get some leeway, a little history about me, just brief. I'm a pretty platform agnostic guy. Like I grew up with Nintendo as my main console of choice. I loved Mario. I know you have thoughts.
I don't hate it, but go ahead. Paint me in a negative light. Why don't you, Joe?
Listen, I believe Mario is a villain, an intergalactic being that we both should fear, godlike even, fear yet revere. So trust me, that's a story for another day. But like for me in my teen years, I jumped from PS2 to Xbox constantly. And I remember the 360 days early into that generation, I chose my side. I was an Xbox kid, right? I have some of my it's one of my favorite consoles of all time. But you only get to so many red rings until you get disenfranchised. My number was 6.
Oh, yeah. Mine is 6 too. That's legit crazy. Because
God bless.
The stories for all of them, the first Xbox we ever got, Christmas Day, opened it, red ring right out of the box. Took it to Best Buy, returned it, brought it back home. Within the end of the month, red ring again. Took it back, got another one. Had the next one for 3 months. Sent it off. Microsoft was supposed to be repairing it. They sent it back. Cool. Next one, red ringed about 6 months later. Sent it off. Microsoft say that they got it and they sent it back. We never saw it again. We lost our Xbox. Two more Xboxes that we got. Yeah, so 6 was our final number 2. We got to where we wouldn't even send it in. We just wrap it in a hot towel, plug it in. I don't know if you ever tried that trick.
Oh yeah, I did. I know exactly how you feel. So like for me, it was just like, I remember seeing off, even the slim version had it. They said it didn't, but it had it.
Yes, it did.
And thank you, because when I tell some of my more Xbox leaning friends, they're like, no, it didn't. You're a liar. I'm like, really? Because I saw it. They just removed the LED. Anyway, I get heated. But
can't have a red ring if you don't have those lights.
That's right. It was at that point where I was just like, okay, I've been out of PlayStation for so long. I worked at GameStop. I literally bought a PS3 Slim off of some guy that was just trying to get weed money.
And of course. Classic. I have that story. I bought a 40 gig backwards compatible PlayStation for my buddy, or 60 gig. I'm sorry. Yeah, for $40.
Yep. Just for some reefer, Jesus. So like, don't do drugs, kids. You end up making foolish decisions by selling your consoles. And I go to my buddy Mike at the time and go, Mike, I'm new into the PlayStation land. Where do I go? And he goes, you just need one game, my friend. And he gave me Uncharted 2 and the complete edition. And I remember playing that game and literally seeing the closest thing to God. I was like, video games are this? They can do this? This is crazy. This is nuts. That's a
landmark title if there ever was one.
It really was. And ever since then, that's where I've been the PlayStation guy. But even to that extent, during the PS3 era, I was just like, put trophies, whatever. I don't care. I like the numbers more. And then there was something about the PlayStation 4 where I was really loving the Order 1886. It needs a sequel. Just don't take it as seriously.
After my own heart.
Take the film grain out. You got something there. Let's play around with it.
I don't even mind that. But at the same time, if they took the letterboxing out and then took the film grain out, I'd still be fine. I personally love those aspects. I think that game has such a distinct style.
Yeah.
I love playing that game. I play it all the time.
Yeah, it's great. And so like I platinumed it, and that's when it hit. And then Bloodborne came out. And that was an experience.
You know, that was my return. The Order 1886 was my return to platinuming. I had played that game, and I was on I replay that game like every year and a half or so. And so I was on like my first replay of the game, and I thought to myself, I don't have the platinum in this. I'm missing a few collectibles. And so I got it and I knocked it out, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot how good that could feel. And I had like 7 platinums at that point. So you got to think this is like 2017 or something like that. Or it was 2016. And then I was playing the 2015 Need for Speed, and I was like, I want to go for platinum in this. Yeah. And then from there, it just went from, by the end of that year, I had like started with 7 platinums, and I was already at like 30, and I was like, oh God.
Yeah. So like, that's my like PlayStation history in a nutshell. Is just like that's why I think my view is, and our view actually is so unique, because we appreciate everything because we have fond memories of really everything.
Oh, for sure, dude. Fable is one of my favorite games of all time. Oh, absolutely. It's so good. I love that game.
Are we the same consciousness, just split between 2 goddamn people?
We very well might be. I don't know. We'll have to do a full check there, because Fable is at the top of my Xbox IP. Like, yes. I'm excited very cautiously for what they're doing with Fable, because Fable kept going into the ground. But Fable the Lost Chapters is one of my favorite games of all time.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
I can't even put a number on how many times I beat that game.
Oh, dude! Whenever I had my my 1X for a little bit, the first thing I did was replay Anniversary in 4K. I was like, "Oh, this game is so good!" So like, good. Somehow I'll not play that game for a year or two, and I'll come back to it, and I'm like, "How did I forget that this game is this good?" It's a classic, all-time classic.
Absolutely.
All right, let's see. Let's get moving on here. It seems as though Sony is silently releasing a pretty wonderful change to the console's Explore tab. Eagle-eyed users have noticed that changes have been made to the tab to make it more of an appealing service. It now displays information on your friends' activities and also more in-depth look at trophies. It still does include PS blog posts, unnecessary potential God of War spoilers, that was rough, and
oh my God, yeah,
news and notes from games you followed. This change, as of writing, does not appear to have been widely released, but the specter of Chris Figs does have the new Explore tab, and it does appear to be much more usable. In the rare case I accidentally pressed down whilst on the tab of the dashboard. Yeah, that's a real small feature, but I'd like to see UI evolve a little bit throughout the generation. And I've always liked Sony's take of start with something really good and then slowly make it better. Whereas Xbox has really had a number of throw something, get it out the door, completely change it, completely change it again.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, we saw that with their new dashboard update, and and you could just picture like, first off, they're like, we gave you wallpapers again, and everybody's like, yay! And they're like, now we're gonna make a dashboard where you can't goddamn see it, and everybody, you could just picture in your head the Fallout meme of like everybody disliked it, and they're like, okay, we're gonna think it over again, like.
Yeah, well, it's rough. I remember during the 360 generation, speaking as I had one to start the generation, and I played Skate on it, and I love that. But then I got tired of them red ringing and eating my disc up because I had the issue where it would put a ring on my disc. So I gave up. I was like, I've been wanting a PS3 anyway. My mom, I convinced her to actually buy me one. We could only ever really afford one console at a time, so I was like, look, this is what I want. But after I started working on my own and bringing my own money in, I bought like an Xbox 2 more times before the end of that generation. And I remember each time, and I borrowed my brother's at one point, every single time I would come back to Xbox, the dashboard was completely different.
Yeah.
And it was like, why do I have to relearn how to use a console every single time I come into it? It's like PS3 is ultimately a better version of the same thing. And PS4 did that, and PS5 is doing that. And it's like,
I love how
we talked about earlier.
Iterates.
Sometimes you don't fix what's not broken. PlayStation's UI is not always a perfect, but I feel like it's been very consistent, and for the most part, they've tended to keep something that you can use out of the box if you're familiar with it. Whereas Xbox has on multiple occasions. I remember Xbox One, same situation. I came back to it after having one at launch and getting rid of it. And then I came back to it for some odd reason, and it was when they implemented the Windows 10 dashboard, and I was like, okay, what the hell? It's been a rough ride. So it's nice to see them moving that.
Yeah, nice to see them move in that direction. And you're right. I love how PlayStation, they have this look. They're like, not even say it's function over style, but like they have this look that no matter if you came back from the PS3 to PS5, you have the idea of how to use this thing, of 100%. How it works.
And it's funny, reason. The only time they've ever veered from that was for the Vita. Yeah. And I think that there might be a correlation in their head of maybe we should have just done the XMB. I'm almost surprised that as a last-ditch effort for Vita, they didn't try and update it to where the UI was an XMB.
Same.
I don't know if it would have helped.
Even with the controllers, like, listen, PS3's controller was an abomination. But, like, you see it evolve with the DualShock 4, and then you're seeing perfection, literal perfection with the DualSense.
Oh, it's a great controller.
I will take
a great controller.
No. Oh, Xbox, the off sticks. Get over yourselves. Get over yourself. The stick placement doesn't matter. Okay? It's comfortable. Haptics feel great. I like the adaptive triggers. Sue me, internet. Sue me.
Speaking of controllers, Sony recently filed a new patent for a new technique that would detect when you put your controller down and take a break so that your PlayStation can automatically pause a game for you, similar to how earbuds with sensors in them stop the music if it does not detect the earpiece to be in your ear. This is an interesting one because I see some people going like, I don't really need that. But if they already have all of the stuff needed to make this happen, it's very easy to pause my music, but you know what? I love these earphones because if I just pop them out of my ear, it stops playing the music. When I pop them back in, bam, it's right back to it. I just heard it ding because it knew it was in my ear again. It was like, oh, okay, let's keep going.
What earbuds are you rocking right now, by the way?
Oh, man, I'm rocking the Pixel Buds.
Pixel Buds?
I can't remember. Pixel Buds A, maybe? They came free with my Pixel 6, but I love these things. They're
humble
very
brag.
comfortable.
I have AirPod Pros, and my favorite feature about the AirPod Pros, again, humble brag, I'm a Apple slut, is I love when the earbud gets stuck in my ear and I have to fish it out. Really great design, Apple. You guys really crushed it. I really love the panic that something is stuck in my ear, and I may need to get tweezers. That's always excellent.
That is rough.
But the sound quality is great. So like you give it a take. No, this is a great feature because I do put my controller down. I would love like a smart controller where it's just like, hey, maybe we don't need haptics right now. You put your controller down, we sense there's no handprint, whatever the case is. I don't know. And we're going to save you battery because God knows these controllers, if there's the only complaint to any PlayStation controller is these batteries are so small.
Never enough. I agree. I mean, I have just learned very early on to always have two controllers, get a controller charging stand, and the PS5, great because you don't have to add anything onto it to make it happen, and just rotate those two. I was playing God of War, it said controller's low. I slapped down that controller, picked the next one up, kept going, no thought about it. It's unfortunate that that's the solution, though.
It's unfortunate, and they know it. They know they get away with it as well. So, like, I have already 5 DualSense controllers. I got blue, red, purple, which is the best one, black because it's better than the white.
I have 4.
You have 4. I have the God of War one, one, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I got the God of War one, the Cosmic Red one. I got the Cosmic Red plates for my system. And on day one, I bought an extra controller. So I have the white controller that came with it, the white extra controller. I'm probably going to sell those because I don't need more than 2. No. I'm about to just divest in those. I don't need them.
Yeah, divest in them and then get, like, I don't know, maybe the camo. Camo is very tacky, but, like, just get a better color. I feel white is just so bland.
It is, and they do show dirt.
Yeah, and
I'm pretty meticulous about keeping my hands clean.
Yeah,
and even mine have just not a dinge. I'll give it that. It's the whole controller's not yellowing, but that texture of the PlayStation symbols holds a little bit of dead skin.
And I'm sick of people like I'm sick of the shame because you saw that one controller where someone like just. Let's be honest. It looked like they took a dookie on that controller. Let's be real. And now everybody's like I saw some people like, I don't know why anybody would need to clean. Like, I wash my hands. I'm like, I do too. What are you trying to tell me? I don't. I'm very meticulous.
Dude, we have worked. Me and you, it sounds like both worked at GameStop. And I will tell you, if anything, I've seen the worst of controllers come in.
Exactly.
I have dealt with some controllers, and I have seldom seen anything online that matches the horrors I've seen in person.
Yeah. Yep.
That's as much as I'll say.
Yeah, absolutely. Never buy a used system from GameStop. Just never.
I will never buy a used controller unless it's a system so old that you can't buy new. Yep. And even then, I'm super picky. I'm like, I don't know about this one.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, cool patent though. I do like this idea. Be curious to see. It kind of sounds like you're talking about, like, I don't know what the sensors would be for how they know if you do or don't have it picked up. But do you remember the point in time where the DualSense, before we knew it as such, when it was just the new PlayStation controller, had something talking about there being heart rate sensors in the pads?
Yes.
Like in the palms?
Yeah.
What if that technology has been there all this time and we just didn't know it? I doubt it because of how I was reading it, but it would be interesting if there's some vestigial part of that where they can use that and go, that sensor that kind of just got left as part of us having to get out to market is beneficial in this way. But I guess what we can really do is look at the patent and see how the patent explains it functioning to know whether or not it's using anything, or if it's more aptly doing something that I wonder, there has to be some kind of feedback. Something has to come back into it to tell it, even if it's just a 6-axis. It may be that it recognizes 6-axis is at a perfect still point and not moving. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it's
I don't think it's called that anymore.
The gyroscope. Yeah. Maybe that it's like, it's user's not holding it, or it's held in this position for so long, it's now in sleep mode. I think that's probably it.
Yeah. That would be pretty cool because, definitely when you're fighting a certain boss in God of War Ragnarok's post game and you get mad and you put the controller down, it's nice the game just pauses for you.
I haven't broken I'm a very sane individual. I came very close yesterday with that person in particular where I squeezed it. I could feel the plates of my DualSense. Yeah, start to like, whoa, Joe, what are you doing?
Started sounding like a Nintendo Switch.
Let's not get started.
You know what? We have more news. So EA Sports College Football was originally slated to return summer of 2023, but EA has announced that it is pushing that back to summer 2024 before the long-awaited return of what many say is their preferred football game franchise. That means very little to me, but I have a lot of people in my life who love those things. Are you much on sports games?
God, I can't even tell you who's in the playoffs.
Me either. I don't watch sports besides soccer occasionally. I am known for loving some FIFA. I got the FIFA 15 Platinum on Vita earlier this year or late last year. I think it was late last year. Yeah. I'm partial to some FIFA, but I never buy it day one because they don't change enough. Like my thing with sports games is I know Kyle last week was talking about how great MLB The Show is. But for my personal view, since I don't follow sports and don't care about rosters or anything like that, I want features.
Yeah.
The only thing that's going to make me buy a new one is if there's a real feature. And I've noticed most sports games only really have a new feature every 3 or so years.
I think most people have kind of figured that out too. It's like, yeah, you can wait a year or two, maybe even 3, and then jump back on it. But that casual base, man, and also,
that's where the money's at.
Most people, that's where the money's at, and most people are weak, so they're like, new thing, new number, let's go. So yeah, I'm happy for you guys. I'm glad EA's taking the time, but God, I remember actually a few weeks back, I was talking to someone. She's just like, could you name how many football teams can you name? Shocking. And then she goes, okay, for the teams you don't know, what cities are these teams from? Or what's the name of like the...
All right, let me think this through. Minnesota Vikings. Baltimore Ravens.
Yep.
New York Giants.
Yep, but they play in New Jersey. What a lie.
Interesting. Okay.
I found out there's a team in South Carolina.
Pittsburgh Steelers.
There's like, I think it's like the South Carolina, Packers. The Carolina Panthers or something. Yeah. I'm like, wow, that team sucks so bad that neither state wants them. They're just like, how about both? They're like, I assume. Is it South Carolina? Is it North Carolina? Who knows? But
it's Carolina.
I can tell you, it's just
no. That's
Carolina.
Funny though. In thinking about it, I mean, I guess I've grown up and around people who like it enough. But like my dad is like super into racing stuff, so I know more about NASCAR. Fair. Than I do, and I don't even really watch it, but it's like one of those weird hobbies that him and I somewhat share. So like I keep up with it just enough because I do find it enjoyable, but I know it's like a common point for us. So I enjoy being able to have something to talk with him about. Yeah, it's funny how it goes. I got a question for you though, Joe.
Oh, okay.
Looking at EA Sports College Football as kind of an underrated game, as many have seen, as Madden survived and it went away for many years. Rude Cold, one of our patrons, longtime listener, he says, what is Joe's most underrated game that we should all check out? That's a question for you only, good sir.
Underrated game that we should all check out. That is such a good question.
It's a hard off the top of your head question too, isn't it?
Off the top of yeah, because there's like... I always say Bloodborne because it's just like, it's Bloodborne, baby. You need to play.
How is that underrated? No.
But it's not underrated. It's
and
not.
You know what? It is because it's not nearly as loved or at least bought as it should have been. I'll give it that. That game only sold like 2 million copies. That's an amazing game. Yeah,
well, that's what the lamestream media wants to tell you. I believe it sold way more than that. What's it under? I'm trying now. I'm looking behind me. One sec. You buy us time while I look behind you.
Hey, you don't worry about it. While he looks at his things, we're going to go ahead and knock out this next one real quick. After busting back onto the scene with a new trailer and release date, Dead Island 2 joins many other games this year and being pushed, hopefully, one last time to a new date of April 28th, 2023 from its original February spot. All right, time's up. You got an answer, Joe?
Listen, I'm the voice of the people.
I only play the rated games.
That's right. I only play the games that I hate to say that I'm the tastemaker, but like I am kind of the tastemaker in the games industry because I only like the big ones. I don't
know. How easy of you. You know. It's
very
not,
humble.
This is such a weird question, right? But it's like most underrated game. I can never go there because I always know that I will eventually have missed something that I love. But a game that I really enjoyed that I've often mentioned in this category that I didn't see get a lot of love is a game called Omen Sight. Okay. And it was a little indie game. I wonder if Kyle, being Mr. Indie that he is, checked out. But it's a smaller little 3D action game.
I guess Brute Force on the original Xbox. God bless that game. There's an alligator man on it, I think, on the cover.
Brute Force. Oh, Brute Force.
Yeah, that game kicked ass. Give it another chance. Yeah, there you go.
You know, I'm going to throw one, not like you can play it at any point in time today, but man, there was a lot of really odd PS2 games that I ended up playing just from demo disc and stuff. One of my other go-to games that I don't know if it's truly underrated, but Maximo Ghost to Glory is one of my favorite little games that I don't hear enough people talk about, but I love it. It's one of my favorite PS2 memories.
I got another one. Shout out to Marcus O'Neill. He made us play Puppeteer.
Oh yeah,
on
man.
PlayStation
I
Now.
tried, and I should go back to. I tried on PS3 when it was a PS Plus game, and I still have a PS3. I may do that again. I
It's a
couldn't
great
get
little
into
game,
it,
dude.
but I didn't hate it. I just couldn't get into it at the time. But tastes change a lot.
Yeah, it's super
that
unique.
was a
Check it
beloved
out.
game. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving back on to Dead Island 2, do you have any thoughts here? My only thing about Dead Island 2 is that when you've been away for so long, to come back so confidently with a release date and then push it back is just an unfortunate look. I'm not throwing any extra shade at them. This sucks. But it only sucks insofar as you've had to deal with being the super delayed, who knows if it's ever coming game, to finally coming back out and looking like, oh, this is a real game, to, no, never mind, we need 12 more weeks. 12 weeks is very little time in the grand scheme of things.
This game, first of all, I'm going to say it loud and proud, does not look great. I
didn't like Dead Island to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, Dead Island 1 was rough. That was a game that had a lot of promise, but it was so buggy at launch. Dying Light is a fantastic game. Dying Light 2, I think, is a little bit too bloated, but it's a beautiful open world that's doing everything that Dead Island's doing and looking better while doing it. So I don't have much faith in this, to be honest.
It's funny. In thinking back to that now, I feel like I remember a lot of people being hyped for Dying Light 2, and it is another game that I don't... Is it anywhere in the Game Awards?
Nope.
Yeah. I also feel like most of the people
I love the open world. I'll say that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like most people who I know who are really excited for it played it for like a couple hours and then just bounced out.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that speaks to about the game. I don't know if it's that it took too long to get to us or what, but I feel like I remember hearing for months and months and months and even years after the first game came out, and now Dying Light 2 has been oddly silent.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yes.
But it's the reality of games. All right. Finally, our last piece of news. PlayStation has revealed its Black Friday deals. It includes 25% off the PS Plus tiers and discounts on over 500 games. Titles like Horizon Forbidden West and Gotham Knights have seen massive discounts already, with the latter of the two being 40% off mere weeks after release. Did you try out Gotham Knights?
I have not yet, but I got it for like $15 because I traded in Splatoon 3 for it. So I will be trying this out. I can't say
it's a
this
game
week.
I'll try for the right price.
Yeah, I think for like $15, I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. But this week I'm a busy boy, so no promises.
I understand that. Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy boy schedule to come be on here. I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you, sir.
So to round the show off, I figured that all of the other questions that we didn't quite get to will be a good way to end this out. So first question, of course, thanks to every single person. We get a lot of responses on very short notice. Blake Popst, one of our longtime listeners, sharing sentiment with something that Sean One Neo was also curious about. What's the longest, hardest plat you guys have ever gotten? That sounds like... Huh?
Oh, sorry. When we make a sexual like innuendo sounding
who's
thing,
the longest?
we go who like that. That's what. It's a dumb sound, and I apologize.
I appreciate it. He says anyway. What's the longest, hardest plat you guys have ever gotten? Was it worth it? Has going for a plat ever made your feelings on a game change? That is, yes. It seems like a sentence full of double entendre.
Yep. A lot of it.
So I don't blame you. So, yeah. But looking at that, we were talking about platinum. So I know you don't have a ton of them, but I think he asked the real question about why me and Chris are quite different in the way we view platinum. So for you, do you have a platinum that you go to as like the one that you are the most proud of because it took you the hardest and the longest? And have you had one, be it that one or another one that kind of made you feel either more positively towards the game or more negatively towards the game?
Got it. I got it. Okay, so there's two. First, Bloodborne, always a shout out to the greatest. Love Bloodborne. God, it's one of those games like your Terraria. I beat it so many times. I'm like, why haven't I gotten the platinum for this? Mm-hmm. All right, because the challenge dungeons are bad. But I love it. Got that plat. Felt great. Sekiro is the hardest platinum I've ever gotten. Hands down, bar none. And God, did I feel so great after getting that plat. It was fantastic. I beat that game, I believe, twice over, did this stupendous grind for it, and I felt great. The one that made me change my mind on the game, shout out to Returnal because it's a great game, but with a horrible trophy list that relies on RNG, right? To get those little sigils. I forget what they're called now, but on the ground, it's all based on luck. I believe it's changed significantly since then. The drop rate of those things are significantly higher, but I remember playing that thing on launch week, and I was sort of starting to sour on the game because I was looking for one last goddamn sigil and couldn't find it in the underwater level, and it was just a pain in my ass. But I got it, and I love that game. So,
speaking to Returnal, Blake, the person who asked the question, has recently got a PS5. I don't want to say he tends to be an Xbox person, but I think that's really a pretty fair way to do it. He tends to spend
Blake,
large
you make me
sections.
Sick. I'm throwing up right now.
But anyway, he started playing Returnal, and he's like, Returnal's awesome. And then he beat Frike and was like, oh, this is cool. And then he died, and he's like, wait, so if I die, I have to restart the entire game? I was like, it doesn't matter how far in you are. You have to restart the entire thing. And he's like, I'm done. I can't play anymore. And I got to tell him, I felt very similar, right? I got to the second boss, the second area's boss, and it was at launch, and it was very hard. But more importantly, the problem I was having with it is at the time, the runs are so long that the game is kind of at odds with itself, because if you leave a run, you're just done. So like if I wanted to play another game, I had to, and I was in the middle of a run, I either had to just go ahead and die or just turn it off, or I had to keep playing, which pushed me to this point where like I felt like I was hating the game because it was constantly getting in my way of wanting to do other things because I was trying not to lose progress. And so now they've added the ability to put a run in sleep mode basically and then come back to it. And I wonder if my opinions would change, but I also just think my love personally of roguelike games is that the iteration of each run is quick. It's typically at most within about an hour. Like Hades, you can beat Hades in about an hour, a successful run. And then you can keep doing that. But, like if you fail 15 minutes into a run, it's like, it's not that big of a deal. If you fail 45 minutes into a run, it hurts, but it's like, I can get back there in the same day. Every time I'd play Returnal, if I died, I was like, I'm just done. I'm done for today because I can't bring myself to play 2 hours to get back to where I just was.
You got to get real sweaty.
It is rough. And that doesn't speak to the game, but speaking to the way the game was designed for me personally, I think it's bad game design for my preferences.
Sure.
Because it ends up pulling away from my ability to otherwise. I typically love those, like a game this year that I thought looked kind of until I played it. Tribes of Midgard is a roguelite kind of work together game, and I ended up loving that game and grabbing the platinum. And that is actually one of those games where I think working toward the platinum made me love it more because it pushed me to do some of the things that I may not have otherwise done. But have you ever had a game that getting the platinum just kind of made you, or at least working toward the platinum at the very least, made you go, no, I don't like this game anymore?
That's such a great question because I honestly, God, I think it's the closest is Returnal, because it's just like how many times I gotta get to this underwater level, and then like the game maybe crash on me, and then that sucks, or maybe it didn't read it right. There's so many times where I rage quit. Actually, Sekiro, the one boss, an owl-like figure could straight up eat my. That guy sucks. I hate his guts. And that fight made me lose my dang mind. I hate him. So yeah.
I can think of a few for me. I think my hardest platinum, or at least longest that it took me to build up to it by nature of how I chose to play, I restarted multiple times with multiple friends to share my love of Terraria. That is absolutely the game that took me the longest to platinum. It was 7 years.
Jesus.
From launch to when I platinumed it, or something very close to that. It may have been 6, but it was quite a long time. So that felt really great. And I actually thought playing for the platinum there, it did start to grate on me a little bit, but it mostly made me love the game more because it's one of those ones where it's like you have to get every pet, but the trophy is not set to what the pets were when that the list launched. Instead, every time the game updates and adds more pets, that trophy gets harder and harder and harder. So I actually ended up if I would have platinumed the game way earlier, I probably could have had a much easier platinum, but instead I waited until the game was like nearing one of its last updates to be like, I'm going to platinum it now. But a game that I think slowly but surely kind of drew me out of it because it's just bad trophy design, and it's on me for wanting this dumb platinum like we talked about earlier. But Mod Nation Racers Road Trip, which is a Vita title, I adore Mod Nation Racers. It's one of my favorite kart races of all time.
That's awesome.
But it's one of those play, create, share titles like Little Big Planet. So I got all of the trophies and had a blast getting the trophies that were for actual gameplay. And I was like, damn, this is so good. And then I got to those last couple of trophies, and it was when they were announcing that servers were going to be shut down. And so I had a month, and me and a friend just spent time creating dumb things and uploading them and downloading them, uploading them and downloading them. And it was like, it ended up being like 20 hours of my gameplay was that. Just so because we didn't have enough people to boost it, we were just boosting ourselves. And that really it soured my legacy of that game. I still love the game, but there's like that negative thought where it's like, I just wish that wouldn't have been my last memory towards getting the platinum. It's like, I like having platinums be tied to positive memories.
Yeah. I'm trying to look at here. I'm still going down the list to see like what is Kena, Bridge of Spirits. I got the platinum by the glitch.
Yeah. That's actually why I didn't. I was like, I'll probably do it if I could pull the glitch out, but I'm not worried about it now.
I got it. I think I got it like the day before, and Kyle couldn't, and Kyle is jealous of the fact that I have that platinum.
Dude, that game is hard.
It is.
Much like God of War Ragnarok, that game, but I think Kena has a bigger issue because it's a game that looks like it would try not to be hard because of its more family-friendly animated style, but that game is balls to the wall hard at a couple spots.
Hits you in the mouth, yeah.
That was Souls-like occasionally. There's a couple of boss fights where I was like, what? God. What? Dude, the final boss, I was about ready to lose my crap. I was like, this is so hard.
Yep.
But that challenge can be such a great sense of dopamine. It's like meth straight to the dome. It's like, oh, I got it.
Absolutely.
Oh, all right. Let's see. Next question. Jehudi MD, one of our patrons. He says, what does your backlog of games look like, and how do you decide to chip away at it? That's actually a really good question.
I have a very Zen-like nature of my backlog and what it looks like. I don't have one. I refuse to. There are games that
you refuse the idea of a backlog.
I refuse the idea. Are there games that I have waiting for me in the wings? Sure. Like I have Gotham Knights and Plague Tale. That's the game that I'm playing next. But I'll get to them. I have no pressure to get to them. I'm on the last level of Cyberpunk. I love that game, by the way. Updates.
Great game.
Fantastic. Judy is main. And we stand Judy 110%.
I was so disappointed.
You're a Pan Am?
No. I love Pan Am too, but okay. Judy was really my girl.
Yeah.
But the game doesn't want her to be your girl, so it does not matter. For me, I was a male
enough.
V. Chris and a lot of my friends tend to play as female characters in those games. So
my friend
they didn't face
Luke,
the same heartbreak as I did.
Yeah, my friend Luke is like, why do you play as a female in a game? And I'm like, first off, why do you care? But secondly, because I want to be a sexy lady with a gun. Who cares? A badass, badass lady with a gun. Who cares? And I knew walking in that Judy, she prefers ladies, and so I was just like, I know that she's my wife, so I have to pursue her. So I'm going to be female V, and female V sounds way better than dude V. Oh my God, leaps and bounds better. So
I like both of them. I mean, but fair enough.
So Judy is main. We stand Judy. All our depressed emo Hispanics understand the plight of Judy, so that's why we stand here so hard.
My God, here's the thing. Spoiled for choice because Pan Am is also my girl. Yep. And I was like, if I can say anything, I think, dude, CD Projekt Red's writing is phenomenal. Because I'm going to tell you, as dumb as it sounds,
I know what you're going to say.
With the disconnect, I felt like I had a connection with two completely fictional characters, and I was like, this is a hard. Because at that point, I was playing at launch. I did not know that Judy was not a romantic option for male characters, so I was working it, man. I was like, I'm going to do this, but I was working Pan Am as like my side piece, and I was like, which one am I going to really choose?
And then at the same exact time, you're like, I have a fucking wife.
100%.
I'm not going to out this person one bit, Brett, but there is a married person that I know who's just like, I feel like I've had a more of a connection with these two people than most of my relationships I've had.
Oh, no.
Like, oh my God, you need to reevaluate. And also, I feel bad for your significant other.
Also, shout out to the writing quality, though.
Yeah,
writing and performance quality. Because, I mean, both of those characters are very well realized. They're very well written. And then the performance helps sell what was written for them. Absolutely. I mean, that game, its characters are wild.
Dude, Johnny Silverhand's, the game is brilliant. I just wish it launched in a better state, but the game is brilliant. Johnny Silverhand, great. Anyway, but I'm on the last level, but I want to platinum the game, so I'm just doing all the side missions. Of course, it glitched out on me, so I had to restart 20 hours of the game. Great. But like, I'm at the last level, and I'm just doing side missions now. But it's sitting back, and I'll get to it when I get to it. Plague Tale is there. That's the next up. Then next is probably Gotham Knights, and I'm going to play around with Cyberpunk. And then next is probably either Final Fantasy Crisis Core or, Witcher 3 update.
Crisis Core is a fantastic game. I love that game.
I can't wait. So like for me, I'm just like, there's games I'm looking forward to. They're games that I have, but I'm not like stressing out about it. It's
a good way to approach it.
Yeah.
In reality, you do have a backlog, but by choosing not to look at it as something that you have to work through, it gives you a lot of freedom. And that's really the way I approach it. Because I mean, like if I look at games that I have games that at the moment has just not struck me, despite the fact that I've bought them. I still have a sealed copy of Code Vein in my thing where my physical discs are, and I have yet to play it. I have Divinity 2 Original Sin, yet to play it. So it's one of those things where like I wait for a moment to strike me, and some of my favorite gaming experiences have come from me being like, here's a game I've been super curious about for a long time, and I'm finally just gonna when I'm sitting there bored and I think like, what do I want to play? Instead of doing that thing where you just scroll through a list, I think back to one game that constantly comes to mind. I'm like, I probably need to get around to that. And then I'll just be like, I'm going to start it. And as long as it catches me right there, I'll keep going. And there's been some, like the Pathless was that for me earlier this year. I was very apprehensive about it whenever it launched because I thought it was a little expensive for something I was unsure of. And then I played it and I was like, oh, this game's great. Like I would have gladly spent 40, 50, whatever it was for this game. Absolutely. But I'm glad that I got to have that experience without having to worry about it being tied to it being a launch-ish title. And so sometimes it's nice to play things at a way. So looking at my backlog of games right now, I want to get back to Hot Wheels Unleashed and actually beat it and complete it. I want to get back to there's a couple of games that are indie games that I'm wanting to get around to. Cult of the Lamb is one of them. One of them just came out today, actually, that looks amazing, and I really want to play it, but I'm trying to wait for Chris.
Evil West?
Ship of Fools.
Oh, Ship of Fools. Okay, let me see that.
Yeah, it's a co-op roguelite where you go through and you're on a ship and basically you have roles on a ship. It's like a 2D top-down style game. You should definitely check it out. I think it looks really great. Me and Chris have been looking at it all year long like this looks really cool. So there's a number of those. Of course, Need for Speed's on the horizon, so I wouldn't call it backlog, but it's a game that's very much in my head of what do I need to play. Pokemon's sitting there, but I wouldn't call it a backlog game because I don't intend to really get around to it. I'd say past that, there's games, a lot of times
this game looks
in.
derpy. I'm in. I'm sorry.
It looks great. Yeah. It looks super charming. Persona 5 is forever on my backlog because Chris would kill me if I said it wasn't. Chris, I know you listen to these things, so there you are.
Listen, it's okay, Chris, to admit that Persona 5 is it's a bit much. It's a bit much.
Yeah. At least it's a lot to ask of someone.
It is a lot.
Say that much.
There's some people I tease about it. Listen, I love you Persona fans. I'm happy for you guys, but man, oh man, every time I make it 45 minutes in that game and I take a nap. It's too much. It's too much. But I'm glad y'all like it.
Yeah, I think that's all. I mean, looking at things that I'm truly interested in playing, I know there's more on my plate. Plague Tale Requiem is one of them because I quite loved Innocence, though I've heard things that have shook my confidence in that. But when things shake my confidence, it kind of just makes me want to play it more because I'm always like, am I going to feel that same way?
Yeah.
That's always my
I heard it's nothing but great things, so I'm interested.
I've heard a few things that it falls apart towards the end, but
Same with Innocence a little bit. It gets a little wacky and crazy, but whatever.
I quite liked the ending of Innocence. I thought it was like a good power fantasy, but depends on what you want. So they are Jehudi. Next one comes from Sean One Neo. He says, I'm near the end of Modern Warfare 2, which is something you can speak on Veteran, and I have only earned 2 trophies so far. While this is a great game, I'm disappointed they decided to remove individual trophies for completing missions, and always wondered why they don't have trophies for X kills with X weapon, etc. Thoughts? So you're near the platinum. What is your thoughts as someone who has actually worked through the existing trophy list, and do you wish it was something a little different?
Certain levels have trophies to them. So the level alone has one where I forget I think it's like don't be seen at all, or it's like don't use a gun in Alone. So Alone is
some Dishonored level trophies,
dude.
At least it's only a mission, not a whole game.
Yeah, Alone is an awesome mission for a COD title because it is very much reminiscent of The Last of Us and Resident Evil. You're being hunted down. You are wounded. A whole army is looking for you in this Mexican villa, and you need to survive any way you can. So you're foraging. Like you eventually get a knife that then eventually gets to a gun, to eventually gets a submachine gun, but like you don't have a lot of health. So like you can't get into engagements. You got to think really smart. I played that on Veteran. Okay. That level on Veteran. And it took me 2 hours, full stop, and a help with a guide. I'm not ashamed to say it. That level is rough. So there are certain like things you do in a level that'll get you a trophy. You just got to take a look at it, but it's very achievable. If you get it through Veteran, chances are you could then turn off the difficulty and do all the things that I mentioned. I know there's a couple of them, like one of the car jumping from roof to roof. I think it's like jump on like 6 different cars, but it has to be different makes. So like you're jumping on a cargo ship, but like you might actually have to jump on like cars that are on the side of the road. All different types of stuff. This trophy list is a lot of fun because it's about playing with aspects of the game rather than just playing a level in the game.
It reminds me of A Way Out, where I really like that you can play the entirety of A Way Out and not get a single trophy because you didn't take time to explore the world. Yeah. And I like how every trophy is just tied to one small action, typically, that's just in every chapter. It's like, this is just some off separate thing you can do. And I liked it because there's something about being like, I saw a bird in a cage and I had the opportunity to open the cage and I chose to do it. The game didn't tell me that. I just took it upon myself. Oh, look, I got a trophy
and
for that.
You're rewarded for it. Yeah.
It feels like true discovery trophies, whereas sometimes I look at mission-based trophies where it's just like, oh, you completed this mission. And I'm like, well, it's just padding for the trophy list because it's basically saying like, we're going to make sure that you get to like 35, 40 or something % of our trophy list just for beating the game. And I'm not saying that's an issue. I don't mind those, but there is something about trophy lists that force you to play within the means of what the game can offer that are really fun. I felt that way about Deathloop's Platinum. I thought it was a very fun Platinum to get. And
I still got to get that one.
It's super fun Platinum. I really,
so much fun.
And it's that idea. And as much as I personally can't bring myself to worry about any of the Dishonored ones where it's like you have to play through the entire game without being seen, play through the entire game without killing anyone. And I know you're supposed to try and stack those runs, but they're very hard things to look at. And I'd be like, that seems like a lot. And I know that some people revel in that challenge, and I'm glad that they do. But for me, it's a little rough. Speaking on Call of Duty, I haven't played a Call of Duty but since in terms of new, I haven't played one since hot take. My favorite Call of Duty of the last gen that I did play was Infinite Warfare. I was working towards platinum on that because I think the campaign for that game is flawless. It's so good. It's got really a beautiful story. It understands pacing of gameplay. And anytime you're about to start getting bored with any one aspect, it's like, are you getting a little bored with boots on the ground? Bam, we're going to put you in a dogfight in space. And then, you're getting a little tired of this dogfight in space? Zero gravity. Oh, you're getting a little tired of zero gravity? Guess what? You're going to be stealth riding the ship. It's like the game constantly keeps you on your toes and has a great story and great shooting mechanics. And I love the idea of being able to set your, like having the Mass Effect almost style hub area where you set your loadout before you got on missions. the biggest unfortunate thing about games that don't do well enough is that they tend to throw out the baby with the bathwater on good ideas, because they're like, wow, that game didn't do good. You don't look at why people thought it didn't do good. You just take every new idea and we're like, well, we're not doing those ever again. And that sucks.
Exactly.
Because I was working towards platinum on that game and I got every story trophy up until the point where I realized that trophy, that platinum relies on zombies, which is a game mode I don't really care for. I tried and it was hard and I didn't have anybody to do it with me and I just quit. But I did quite love that. So either way, I'm with you on this. It's unfortunate for people that just like trophies, and kind of like you said, everyone should be able to get them. And one way to easily guarantee that, I'm not saying I agree with that. I don't disagree with it either.
I hate multiplayer trophies, and I'm good at multiplayer games.
I hate them because it puts an expiration date on the platinum, which is another double-sided sword, right? It's like, if the game is not inherently online, then why not make sure that your trophy list is good in perpetuity? But at the same time, I get it. But that's also what led to me going back to Killzone Mercenary and having a blast this year. So maybe there's a upside to everything. All right, moving on. We got one more question here, and I think another answer from you, but there's a secondary question within here that I think is interesting. The Skinny Rage says, will y'all be watching the Gran Turismo Championships this week? If not, what is your overall feelings on esports and spectating games in general, and also your thoughts on in-game rewards for watching streams? So I think I can pretty safely say Joe will not be watching the Gran Turismo Championships.
Can't tell you that I am.
And I will mirror the same thing. I will not. I quite love Gran Turismo, but I am way too busy to even worry about that. That's part of why I think I've never gotten too into sports. I don't have enough time to dedicate to that and still keep my other hobbies in checks. But looking at the idea of esports and spectating games in general, where do you fall on that? Because I find that while all competitive aspects of anything, I can watch a sport and notice when a great moment's happening. I think everyone does. And even though I don't care about football, if you see something amazing happen, you're kind of like, you get swept up in that moment. So there are times where I've seen things while watching people do competitive gaming, esports, that I'm like, oh, this is like, the moment's cool, but it's never been enough to draw me to it as a long-term thing. And I've never really gotten the idea of watching people play games, though I know plenty of people love it. So where do you stand on those?
So for me, my feelings on esports, I'm glad that they're around, though, again, for working on the inside for the short while, it's very toxic, and things definitely need changing there. Absolutely do. That said, I admire the pro scene because you can take a look at what they're doing and try to break down the math and the physics that are at play. Whether it's like Overwatch, which I've taken a peek at, Fortnite, you could see and try to understand why they do the things they do, stack the weapons they stack, or build the way they build. And kind of try to replicate it. I like the personalities that I've seen thus far in the Twitch space. There's been a few people that I'm like, I generally, I dig their vibe, so I'll go and follow them. And I feel like I watch some of them because I like their personalities more than their gameplay themselves, and the communities that they build. And as a creator, I'm looking at that going, okay, I see what they're doing there. I could see how I could implement something here, those type of things. But usually I'm not like watching people on Twitch. If I'm watching people on Twitch or YouTube, it's because they're my friends. More than anything.
Yeah, support. Yeah, that's kind of how I am. I mean, I think that there's value in it all, and I definitely love the aspect of watching people creative problem solve in gaming, and see how far they're willing. It's something that you see in competitive in a different sense, but speedrunning, which is it's an skewed version of competitive gaming.
It is so cool. Like I love IGN does something really cool, or they used to. I don't know if they kept doing it, where they bring in devs to talk about a game that they've made. So like I watched one where it's about Halo Combat Evolved, while someone beat it by the time that conversation ends. So it's like someone beat Halo in an hour 30 minutes, and you're seeing the devs talk about the process of making this game, and then you just see them stop going, oh my god, I can't believe they did this, or they found that thing in there that we knew was broken and they used it. Like, that's so cool to me.
I don't know if IGN continued it, but they did one as a 20-minute Deathloop run.
Mm-hmm.
And that was insanity. And it was so cool watching the developers be like, oh yeah, we never really thought that could be abused that way. And what's great is that the developers know how they're getting over these things. Like, as soon as they see it, they realize, but they're like, we never thought that someone would think to look at that. Like, we never thought someone would try to break the barriers and get out of there. So we weren't thinking about it. And I really like that developers never seem to get mad. They're always like amazed, like, wow, that's kind of cool. Look how they broke the game. That's that's wild. So I think it's fun to watch that thing of people break down something that someone made, but them not be upset and instead be like, wow, you can really learn a lot about how you choose to make games by looking at how people choose to deconstruct your game to get an extra second out of it. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty. I love that. And when it comes to like the in-game rewards, I like that they're beginning to tie that into it. But I also feel like it's padding for getting these onto a thing. I know how many times I've turned on the Halo Championships and just left that tab up.
I just don't do it
every time.
I'm gonna be honest. It's a sheer. I don't think it's a good thing to do. I think it's pretty nasty, and it's clearly trying to get people to do something so that they can benefit. It pumps numbers. It looks fake. I just think, from my values as a person, even though it would benefit me, I would rather just not have the stuff. This is going to sound weird, but I'm to the point where, like, most of the benefits that you get from stupid things, like even pre-ordering benefits, are getting to a point where I just don't do it. Like, I got the collector's edition for God of War. I didn't even enter the collector's edition code. I didn't care. I just played the game with what was supposed to be in the game. And the collector's edition code is just sitting there. So speaking of God of War, we have a giveaway copy that we are going to announce the winner of tonight. Now, sadly, because I was in a rush, I did not prepare that. So I'm going to announce that on Twitter. But thank you to everyone who announced in. We did a cool giveaway where it was talk about your favorite boss fight across the series' long history. And I was very happy to see that there was a pretty even divide of people talking about prior to 2018 God of War and then 2018 God of War. So that's pretty cool. So we'll announce that. But to wrap the show up, and man, I'm going to tell you, I didn't expect this to be that long. So thank you for sticking with me on this.
Oh, dude, it flew by. Yeah.
But I want to take you back up on whether or not, did you want to pose a question for the community's take, or did you want to leave that up to me?
You know what? I'll leave it up to you. But let me think. Let me think real fast. A community question. You know what? I'm going to leave it up. I'm going to leave it to the expert. Because I'm going to say something dumb, and you're like, oh, we already had that question. I'm like, well,
no, you're fine.
It is what it is.
I think a good way to wrap this up, this was my backup plan all along, was to look at the fact that we're in Thanksgiving, we're talking about the Game Awards, and we're talking about celebrating games. And there's no time like now to just take a step back and go, you know what? For all the things that we talk about being thankful for, this is a hobby that I'm so glad that many of us get to do. So instead of looking at something that's timely to the news or something that's happening in the industry, how about you just tell us your 5 games that you're thankful for this year? Doesn't matter if you think they deserve awards. It doesn't matter what it is. 5 games that you're thankful for, and for whatever reason that you choose to share or not share. I'd love to hear them. And maybe we can get a couple of new games on our radar as a result.
Yeah. I like it. I like it, bro.
All right. Well, there we go, man. First and foremost, before we wrap anything up, I think you need to tell these lovely people where they can find you.
Ooh-wee. Well, listen, you can find me over at Mr. Badbit on both Twitter and Hive. You can find the show at PS Trophy Room on Twitter, as well as Hive. And humble brag, currently, we are the #1 PlayStation podcast on Hive. And we need to keep that. We need to keep that momentum. We're at 76 followers on Hive. Sure, we are at 3,000 on Twitter, but like, that's numbers are numbers. 76, huge for Hive, I think. So, you know, let's bump those numbers up. Let's see if we can break this little humble app right here. That said, you can follow the Trophy Room, a PlayStation podcast. If you liked my voice for some other reason, I don't know why, follow me at the Trophy Room, a PlayStation podcast. It is where each and every, usually Thursday, me and my best friend Kyle talk about the latest and greatest in all things PlayStation. So once you're done listening here, you can literally listen to the latest show that we did over there, where we did a huge predictions run of Jeff Keighley's Game Awards. And let me tell you, I get a little grumpy halfway through because Games for Impact Award, come on, what does that even mean, guys? What does that even mean? And yeah, do we have a funny Brazzers joke at the Sony and Honda collab? Absolutely we do. But all that and more over at the Trophy Room, a PlayStation podcast, over at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you find your podcast service of choice, you can find the Trophy Room there. There you go. Thank you so much for having me, Brett. This was fantastic. I can't believe we did 3 hours. Is this the longest episode you guys have done?
It's one of them. Chris and I have a tendency to go longer since we're very conversationally based.
Sure.
Everyone approaches podcasts a little differently. So this isn't completely abnormal for us, but I am surprised that we reached it here. And
very surprised.
I am glad that it was reciprocal and that you were often talking just as much, because there was a few times where I was like, I hope I'm not holding his night up, but I really appreciate it. And I know that we have a number of listeners who love long episodes. Okay. So they have a nice, juicy, here's some double entendre for you, episode for you to put in your ear holes. But Joe, thank you, man. I really appreciate you coming in on such last minute. I know we had planned for one of you guys, if not both of you, to come on to the show in 23 after y'all get some of your award stuff out of the way. Right. But it's cool that this happened. And I think much like you said, you've been one of the favorite guests we've had on the show. So with that in mind, I would love for us to occasionally stop by each other's show if you feel so inclined to have us, and we of course feel inclined to have you.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Love chatting. All right, man. Y'all.
Without further ado, we would like to shout out our patrons who went over to patreon.com/Nartech and gave as little as $1 and really their time to support the show. So without further ado, we want to give a shout out to Barry Rogers, Stingray X, It's a Sin to Win, aka Sean, Aztec King, Lechion69, The Lord Corgi, Salvador Garcia, Hammond Egger, Bailey Robertson, Cypher Primus, Kyle Grimm, Rude Days 93, Kevin Baconbits, Christopher, Danny Villalobos, Jehudi MD, No Fate, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Donovan Williams, Constantly Kenny, Matthew Green, Sean Santarud, Steven Salazar, and last but certainly not least, Shadowist. Thank you all. We'll see you next week.